Assembly. I suppose unlike my good colleagues on the panel this morning and across the week, I suppose I'm not a climate expert or an innovation leader. But I am kind of fortunate to work with I suppose a rogue band of kind of passionate custodians, that we like to call them, overseeing the strategic and sustainable development of our region. And I suppose here, of course, I'm referring to my colleagues and the officials within the Northern Western Regional Assembly, but of course, most importantly, the members of the Regional Assembly. We have many hats on, I suppose. Look, particularly for us, we're very proud to be from, myself particularly, be from Galway City, living in Sligo. But we like to celebrate all our identities, and we're most importantly, I'm a Galwegian, I'm Irish, but of course we're European, and those identities are particularly important to us. I suppose from our perspective, the region faces kind of many challenges. Despite the country's economic success, what we've seen is a very uneven pattern of economic success. And that can be identified where some areas of the country are benefiting significantly less, I suppose, than our capital region. This presents, I suppose, a less positive micro picture of economic success. And I suppose from our perspective and the members' perspective over the last number of years, and we only met with Minister Eamon Ryan on Friday to outline some of these challenges. There's a kind of a startling and widening chasm of regional inequality in Ireland. Like, for example, on many simple measures such as, we'll say, GDP, we have one of the most unequal economies across the EU, and I suppose this is really most acutely felt in our area. And these kind of difficulties are reflected in the European Commission's decision to downgrade the Northern and Western Regional Assembly from a more developed region to a transition region post 2020. And of course, we're the only region in Ireland to hold such a status, which presents a kind of a two-speed economy on the island of Ireland. And that's something that we're strategizing around trying to address. And I suppose in addition, then the European Parliament's Committee on Regional Development has categorized the region as a lagging region, which is a region kind of characterized by extremely low growth, and that's kind of divergent from the rest of the country, and that's very evident, particularly since 2017, 2018. And then I suppose compounding all of this, the signals that indicate that the region can be expected to experience a more complex and long-term recovery from the current pandemic. And today we'll be making a submission to the Irish member state, the government, on how this region can recover through the Recovery and Resilience Fund. So I suppose we started to ask the question, why are we being left behind and what do we do? And I suppose the Green Deal is something that we're going to hear a lot more about. We've all heard the Commission President, Ursula von der Leyen, describe the Green Deal as Europe's man on the moon moment. And I suppose most interestingly, I heard our own chairperson, Enki Hirlach, I suppose, describe the Green Deal as a kind of a timely North Star. COVID-19 has kind of accelerated our need for really good decision making and investment in our communities. And I suppose earlier than expected, what we're seeing is we're being confronted with a kind of a choice, whether to only treat the symptoms of the existing pandemic or to take the opportunity and maybe create a paradigm shift to prepare against future shocks. And what we've decided is that we're going to try and plan for the paradigm shift. And for us, the Green Deal series is part of a kind of a region-wide dialogue. We're armed for the first time with a kind of an aggressive regional, spatial and economic strategy that has the Green Deal already at its core. So it's about implementing it, and we now need to deliver. I suppose I'll finish. I didn't expect to be speaking. Councillor MacDonald will be joining us shortly. But I'll finish by thanking all the attendees for registering. We'd over 170 people express an interest in the series across the week. And I'd like to particularly thank our impressive list of speakers that we have today, but also throughout the week. And finally, again, just to acknowledge the European Commission for facilitating. And maybe what I might do is just invite our first presenter, Mr. Jonathan Claridge, who is, and I hope I get this right, Jonathan, the head of communication with the European Commission office in Dublin, who's always been a good friend of ours and will continue to be. So thank you very much to everybody, and apologies for the slight delay this morning.
Thank you very much, David, for those warm words of welcome, and thank you to Fabienne from the Visitors Service in Brussels for the great job you've done in setting up this meeting. I'm delighted to be with you today, and I think it's incredibly opportune that the Northern and Western Regional Assembly has decided to do this fairly intense week of Green Deal seminars, because at least as far as Europe is concerned, and I think actually more generally for Ireland too, this European Commission, which will be in office until 2024, is going to be focused on all things green, the Green Deal, climate change, environment. That will just be a common thread throughout everything it does. And also when you look at the EU budget, which is now fixed for the next 7 years, from this year up to 2027, all things green are going to be at the heart of that. And so it's a real movement, I think, a big move forward. And I think it's a great idea to work out how the Northern Western Regional Assembly and others in Ireland can benefit from this and what it means to you and your work. A few words about me. I'm British. I'm also naturalised Irish now since a couple of years. Decided it was a good idea to do due to Brexit. It's my second post in here in Ireland. My first time round, I did the political job at the Commission office in Dublin, and now I'm doing the communication job. I've got a few slides. I think I have until 9:30, so I'll just go through a few slides quickly and try and just give you a flavour of what the Green Deal is and maybe some of the issues that you can look at over this week, over the 3 sessions. So firstly, I just wanted to very briefly touch on this because today you're hearing speakers from the European Commission, which is in a sense one of the 3 main EU institutions. I know a lot of you know the EU very well. I understand that not everyone does. So just very quickly, you have the European Parliament in the bottom left there. Ireland has 13 MEPs and 5 of them represent the Northwest constituency, of which you're going to speak to a couple later this week. They have a lot of power when it comes to all things green. They decide jointly with the Council on legislation and also the EU budget. So the European Parliament is a very important and powerful decision-making body in Europe. The Council of the EU, of course, on the right-hand side, that's essentially where the member states meet. And so at a ministerial level, if you're discussing an environment issue, it's the environment ministers, the transport ministers, that type of thing. And the European Council is the top of that council body. They're the EU leaders, the Taoiseach and his counterparts, and they meet and they set really the EU agenda and the big direction for Europe. The European Commission at the top, that's who I work for. In a sense, we're the civil service of Europe, but we're a lot more than that. Any initiative, legislative initiative or the budget initiative starts off with the European Commission. So on environmental legislation, climate change legislation, whatever legislation it is, it originates from the European Commission. And then it goes to the Parliament and the Council, who then have to work out the final version between them. And we also check that legislation is fully implemented. So there we come and chase. For example, on the environment, we've had a number of disputes on environmental legislation, particularly in the past, where Ireland was not implementing the legislation fully. For example, septic tanks or water quality. That's a couple that you probably know well. There's, of course, other EU institutions, the Court of Justice, which checks that that really gives the EU teeth, because basically, if you don't implement legislation, you get taken to court. And also a body like the Committee of the Regions, which is very important from the regional perspective too. So let me move on. And this one I just wanted to underline, because this underlines why it's so timely to talk about the Green Deal now. This commission came into force, entered into position at the end of 2019. Of course, there has been one big issue largely since a year ago, the pandemic. That has, in a sense, dominated the EU agenda. But I think looking ahead, and still at the same time over the last year, it is the European Green Deal that will be the top priority and really the leitmotif of what the Commission and the EU does over the next 7 years, because those are the 6 priorities of the current European Commission, and the European Green Deal is number 1, and that means something. The fact that it's the top of the list, it does mean it's the most important. And so when you're looking at the recovery in the years ahead and what the EU will do, it will be tied to that Green Deal. Incentive, sustainable economic recovery, kind of a new economic model compared to the past. A few issues, or just a few slides to take you through here, just showing why the Green Deal and climate change and environment has become so important. It's partly because the world is changing, huge population increase is coming up, We've seen in Europe huge temperature rises in the summer in some countries. That was Paris in 2019, 42.6 degrees was a new record. And also this huge increase in waste and plastic and the damage that that is doing. So there it says 85% of lit items on beaches is single-use plastic. So it's kind of incredible. What do people think about Green Deal and climate change, which is always important? Do they care about it or not? Well, in Europe, they definitely do. 95% of EU citizens believe that protecting the environment is a priority. So that's a key one. And you can see the one below. Climate change is also important. So it is something that general people see as a priority. And in Ireland, I just wanted to point out one interesting thing. This was actually a survey that was done just before the pandemic, but it asked people what they thought in Ireland were the main issues when it came to Europe and in terms of the Irish government. And when it came to Europe, the main issue that people wanted addressed was the environment and climate change. That was the top issue, clearly, by quite a long way. When it came to the national government, it was a slightly different picture because a number of issues, like it was housing and health were the two top issues. This was back about a year ago with the two main issues, and environment was slightly lower, partly because I think, it's the national government that has the competence on those issues more than the EU, health and housing. But also it's like a reflective thing, people are really looking for Europe to take the lead when it came to all things environmental. This is really just to note how attitudes and policies are changing in Ireland, and a lot over recent years. Ireland's track record on environmental protection traditionally is not good. It's poor. It takes something for the Commission to come out and say that, I think, publicly, but we've said it quite a few times. Climate change targets, Ireland is going to miss all the ones coming up or the ones that have just gone by quite some distance. And as I mentioned before, we've had a whole lot of infringement cases between the EU and Ireland, where Ireland hasn't successfully managed to implement fully EU legislation. So those are some sort of things where, traditionally Ireland not the biggest friend of the environment. However, this is clearly changing. And if you listen to what the current government says about the Green Deal, it's incredibly positive, and everyone, all stakeholders in Ireland, I think, are now fully on board. You do have the Green Party in government, of course, but Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, there's been a huge sea change, I think, in attitudes towards climate change and the environment in Ireland. And the goal now is to have Ireland leading the way and, being a standard setter for future environmental change. This was just a nice photo I had from turf cutting from the past. Again, this was turf cutting I just put in there because it's an area where we've had a lot of fights with Ireland, but it's also an area where we're now working very closely with Ireland. Turf is a huge carbon sink, so in many ways it's a solution to climate change that's beneath our feet. It's a great way of tackling climate change, and we're working very hard with the Irish government now to restore the bogs. At the same time, it still remains controversial because turf cutting is part of people's heritage and culture here. And so it's an issue where we will continue to engage very actively with the government on. And I think in the Northwest region, it's one area where, you have a great tradition of turf cutting. Another one, just to show how the EU and Ireland is working together. This is a particular bird. I'm not sure if any of you know the bird. The clue is on the pull-up behind. It's the corncrake. This bird used to be, I think even back in the 70s, it was common across Ireland. You could find it in the outskirts of Dublin in a few sort of farms that were on the city edge. Now, I guess with modern agriculture and other changes, it clings on to a few remote regions in, I think it's Belmullet in Mayo and a few of the islands down the western seaboard. But again, it's an area where the EU is now working very closely with the Irish government to try and give the corncrake a much stronger foothold in Ireland once again. This one, 5 more minutes, so that's cool. Here, the Green Deal. This was the point that David made. I think, it's the Green Deal. It's not just about protecting the environment and climate change. It's much, much broader than that. And I think, as you will discover over the next 3 days of the seminar, it covers essentially everything. And the whole point is it's a growth strategy. So the whole of the EU's growth strategy is now going to be linked to all things green, basically. It's just going to be something that runs across the board. I think this shows you the different elements of the Green Deal in some ways. I'll just highlight one or two here. I mentioned at the top you have the Climate Pact and Climate Law. As I mentioned there, Ireland's track record isn't great. If you go out to the left-hand side from farm to fork, this is clearly a big one in Ireland, particularly when the EU is concerned, because for many, the main benefit of Ireland's EU membership has been the common agricultural policy. And so from farm to fork, that's really about now switching from making farmers, I guess, the guardians of the environment. So it's much more in future. Payments to farmers are going to be based on them being people who look after the environment and promote biodiversity. It's a huge shift from the days back in the past when they were paid for how much farmers were produced and you had better mountains and that sort of thing. Other areas, if you go down to the bottom, financing green projects, wind farms, transport, public transport links, that's a big area for Ireland as well. And so around there, but I think you'll find something for everyone, basically. It covers such a broad range of areas. And quickly, I've got a few minutes. The key thing is the budget. And this is a big, big change compared to the past. The EU budget is set on a 7-year cycle, 2021 to 2027. On the left-hand side, you have the multi-annual financial framework. This is traditional 7-year budget cycle of the EU. That was agreed at the end of last year under the German presidency, a little bit higher than in the past, but not a million miles away. On the right-hand side, though, you have this massive new amount of EU money, Next Generation EU, 750 billion. And due to essentially it really helped get it over the line, the pandemic and the crisis, the European Commission is able to borrow money now with the backing of the Parliament and the Member States on the financial markets and spend it. It's not that good news for Ireland in some ways, because Ireland has moved from being one of the poorest to one of the wealthiest countries in Ireland. So Ireland gets less of that money than its population share because it's a wealthy country, but it is still a big source of money for Ireland. And down at the bottom as well, offsetting that to a degree, you have this 5 billion Brexit fund where Ireland is in a good position to benefit, particularly in the north and west, because perhaps more than anywhere in Ireland, you are being hit by the impacts of Brexit. And I just wanted, this is really important as well, I think, for your work. 30% of the EU budget spent will be on climate change under both the multi-annual financial framework and this big new Next Generation EU funding project. And for the other budget, there'll be elements woven into that, which means that the work that is funded by that budget mustn't damage the climate or have any serious impact on the climate. So it's really just to say the EU budget, the green element of it is incredibly important. And so in planning your projects, think green, think sustainable. Is it going to work or not? And I think I'm up to half 9, so I'll stop there. There's my contact details. Don't hesitate to contact me if I can help. We're here to help. We're here to communicate. And we already work a lot with David and his team, but we're always there if you need anything from the Commission. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. I'm sure that we can share your presentation afterwards with the participants. No, can't we?
Sure, yeah.
Wonderful. Okay, so I think time has come. I will make Jesus presenter. Thank you, Jesus, for being with us and giving this presentation on the introduction to the European Green Deal. I know that you are very busy, and therefore your availability is much appreciated. So I will give you the floor immediately. And as I said before, I will ask all participants to switch off their videos in order to ensure a good web connection. And if there are questions, please don't hesitate to ask them. You can either raise your hand by clicking on your name, or send your question, you drop it in the chat box.
So thank you very much for the invitation, first of all. And thank you very much also, Jonathan, for this first introduction, because I think that what I'm going to present now is rather complementary to what you said. Let me first introduce myself. So my name is Jesus Alquezar. I'm not Irish, obviously. And I work in DG Environment, where I deal mainly with climate, energy, and the interconnections with other environmental policy, like the circular economy, air quality, etc. You will see that all these areas are really very well covered by the Green Deal. So I'm going to share, So share screen, here it is. Okay. So you have here my email. As Jonathan said, you can contact me at any moment for any questions, suggestion, or whatever. And I'm going to start my presentation with an overview of the Green Deal, presenting you the challenges. So I used to present, when I make these sort of presentations, I used to quote this report of the European Environment Agency. So what we call the SOER, so the State of European Environment, is a periodic publication, a big book of the agency, a sort of flagship publication of the agency that they publish every 5 or 6 years. And this, for us people who work on environment at European level, is a sort of Bible, because here we have really all the data that we can imagine and we can use on the situation of environment in Europe. You have here a quote of Hans Brünig, the director. I'm not going to read it, but basically the key message of this report of 2020 is that we have to make action very, very quickly. What happens that I see that now? Sorry. Oh, yes. So this report explains that we are living 4 environmental crises that are interrelated. This is very important to mention, because very often people concentrate their narrative or their vision on climate. This is only part of the picture. So we are confronted with 4 environmental crises. The first one is the climate one. We are living the highest temperatures in the last years. I'm from the north of Spain, from the Basque Country. Is in a region that is as rainy as Ireland. And this weekend there was a massive forest fire, which is surprising in February. So this is another symptom that something doesn't go well with climate. At the same time, we had snow last week in Texas and in Athens. So you see that these examples show the extent of the climate crisis. But we have other environmental crises. One is biodiversity loss. Another one is natural resources depletion. And the third one is pollution. Let me give you some examples, some data from the scientific literature to illustrate this crisis. On biodiversity, since 1970, we have lost 60% of mammals, birds, reptiles, fishes, and amphibians. 60%. In the last 3 decades, the flying insect population in Germany, in the German protected areas, has decreased by 75%. Of course, many of these insects are pollinators, which leads that to the conclusion that this biodiversity loss is also a problem for our food safety and health. Already in 2014, there was in Europe a deficit of 1.4 million bee colonies. So around yes, I don't have the exact data here. So, but several billions individuals of bees. So this deficit is sorry, I'm going to repeat my sentence. So we had a deficit of 1.4 million bee colonies to properly pollinate the European agriculture. So the problem of biodiversity loss is not only because of nature, it's also for our health. And you know that there is scientific evidence that there is a connection between biodiversity loss and the current pandemic. On resources depletion, we know that since 1970, the use of natural resources have more than quadrupled in the planet, and it continues to grow. We saw a picture from Jonathan about plastic. Only 9% of the plastic generated in the planet is recycled. And even in Europe, even if the industry is moving towards circularity, I think Europe is exemplary in terms of circularity. Only 12% of the materials that we are using are recycled. So you see that there is a lot of work to do. And the problem is that, globally speaking, this situation or this trend is unlikely to change, because we are going to have, in the coming years, in every year, we have 140 million people joining the middle class, with, of course, an aim or an intention to increase their consumption, and is completely logical and acceptable. There is another data that for me is very shocking, that is that it is expected that 70% of the population will live in urban areas by 2050. And half of these urban infrastructures, cities basically, are not built. So imagine the quantity of steel and cement with the related emissions will be needed if we don't change radically the way of building in the planet. Finally, about pollution, there is also a data, European data, that is shocking. That is that every year, the problems linked with air pollution cause about 400,000 premature deaths in Europe, only in Europe. So we are talking about the massive impacts of the COVID, but every year we have a sort of pandemic only related with air pollution. And then only 40% of fresh water in Europe, so rivers, lakes, etc., presents what the agency calls a good environmental status. So you see that we have 4 environmental crises that are interrelated. Why do I say that they are interrelated? I think I have an image to illustrate the links between climate change and biodiversity. On the one hand, climate change affects biodiversity. So, because it affects, it leads to biodiversity loss, to water stress, to acidification, to pollution. So, then climate change has also impacts on health and well-being because of air quality, infectious diseases, extreme events. But at the same time, biodiversity is one of the tools or one of the solutions we have against climate change. Why? Because first of all, the ecosystem services, the ecosystems and their services help to climate change mitigation. So we know, for example, that deforestation represents about 15% of GHG emissions. But at the same time, in the planet, the terrestrial and oceans ecosystems absorb 50% of the anthropogenic emissions. So, in fact, we know that climate change is affecting our ecosystems, but at the same time, these ecosystems are part of the solution to climate change. We are seeing, and this is very worrying, that the sinks, the natural sinks, are decreasing in Europe. while in all the analysis of the Commission to elaborate the plan for 2030 and 2050 for the climate plans, rely strongly on natural things. There is another link, which is adaptation. So the ecosystems, biodiversity, provide the services that are necessary for both natural capital and for our well-being and health. Water and air purification, protection against desertification and floods, urban heat reduction. This is why, if you look at the different documents of the Commission, you will see this concept of nature-based solutions. So we can, for example, make our cities greener. We can restore or we must restore our ecosystems, etc., to make these interlinkages more positive. So probably you are thinking, my God, we are in a very, very bad situation. What is the European Union doing about this? We have to say that the European Union has developed an environmental policy since the 70s. An environmental policy that is really very, very comprehensive. We have legislation on water, on air quality. We have legislation on fuels and their pollutants. We have legislation on recycling, on chemicals, on plastics, so really, there is a full spectrum of environmental legislation. And indeed, the own European Environmental Agency explains that in many areas, the environmental situation has improved since the 70s. Again, I'm going to give a personal anecdote. In my home region in Spain, in the Basque Country, it's traditionally an industrial region. When I was young, in the 80s, 70s, 80s, the rivers were yellow and there was not any sort of life because there was a lot of industry, paper industry, etc., very polluting. Now, okay, the rivers are probably not in a state where you can take a bath, at least I don't recommend it, but you see fishes, you see vegetation, so really the quality of water has improved. The problem is that, and this is very well explained by the agency, the environmental agency, that the pressures on environment are also increasing. And then we need urgent action. Okay, these are the global challenges. Jonathan already explained that the world population is projected to grow, and this is, of course, a basic problem that we have. This slide is rather interesting because I'm talking about environment, but we have to take into account that even enterprises, so the business sector, is worried about this environmental problem. If you look at the global risk report of the World Economic Forum, so not really a traditional green institution, you see that most of the top long-term risks are linked with environment, extreme weather events, climate action failure, natural disasters, biodiversity loss, human-made environmental disasters. So really we see that also industry is aware about these problems. What is the European response? Okay. The European Green Deal aims really at addressing in a systemic or coherent manner all these four environmental crises. When I say that is a coherent and systemic approach, this is probably one of the main changes with the previous Commission or EU policies. If you look, for example, at the previous Commission priorities, so the Juncker Commission, there was one of the priorities, I think it was the second or the third one, about climate and energy. So the climate policy was linked with energy, which represents around 75% of the GHG emissions. But there was not any connection with other problems that are also connected with energy, for example, air quality or biodiversity loss. And this is a big problem because sometimes, so the Commission or the EU in the past, with the best intentions, has created monsters. So in order to solve one problem, we have created
I have the impression that there is a small technical problem.
her priorities to the Parliament, which is this idea that the Green Deal is even a sort of union. There is this here that I quote here, where on the legend for the generation of her parents, then the next generation, it was a matter of well-being. And now the new raison d'être would be for her children. So these new generations is an aspiration of living in a natural and healthy environment, and is of course the Green Deal a new growth strategy. This figure shows how the Green Deal aims at covering all the different areas: climate, energy, but also biodiversity, agriculture, but linked with biodiversity, with the farm to fork, mobility, zero pollution, so the zero pollution action plan that will be presented this year, the circular economy. So you see that there is a logic really between all these initiatives. And there is a two very important elements in the Green Deal. The first one is this concept of not leaving anyone behind. So there is a social component in the Green Deal. I'm going to come back to this right now. And second one is the do not harm principle. This is also a key principle in the Green Deal. So we have to avoid this previous situation that I explained, where a policy, for example, to ensure the supply of energy can lead to more pollution. This is something that under the Green Deal we have to avoid. Till now, really, the Commission has presented plenty of policy initiatives and strategies, mainly strategies. There is a proposal for a climate law, so to reach climate neutrality by 2050. To reach this climate neutrality objective, there is also a proposal for new 2030 climate targets, at least 55% of GHG emissions reduction compared with 1990. This is important because we don't have to let all the efforts for the last year. So the current decade is very important to address climate change. There is a biodiversity strategy, a from farm to fork strategy, a new circular economy action plan, other strategies that are maybe less well known, but very important. Also, it is time to implement. So really implement. So really, this is very important. The Commission can really, this is very important. This is very important. The Commission can present present for impact assessment, modeling.
Jesus, I think there is a
transition mechanism.
Jesus, I think there has been a very short interruption.
Green Deal, just transition, and the money from the European Union would create a leverage for other investments for the Green Deal.
Jesus, I'm sorry. Sorry to interrupt. I think there has been a short.
I don't hear.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. There has been a very short.
Yes, I heard you.
There has been a very short technical interruption, so I'm not sure whether the participants have heard the last part of your presentation from a few minutes ago.
Which I can repeat. But,
I think
maybe this slide.
Yeah, from there, I think. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So I was saying that in this 1 year, basically, the Commission has already presented many strategies and many action plans, especially the proposal for a climate law to make Europe climate neutral by 2050. To reach this objective, we have to increase the climate objective by 2030. This is because otherwise we are going to let all the efforts for the last decades. And you saw in when I mentioned the report of the EEA that this decade is really critical. So the idea is, the proposal of the Commission is to increase the objective by 2030 to at least 55% of GHG emissions reduction, always compared with 1990, the year of the Kyoto Protocol. We have a biodiversity strategy, a from farm to fork strategy. These two were presented at the same time because the idea is also to make the agriculture more sustainable in line with the biodiversity strategy. Then the new circular economy action plan, I'm going to come back to this one later. A new hydrogen strategy. Hydrogen is seen like one of the technologies of the future and really critical to reach these climate objectives. But there are still many technical issues and investment barriers. The methane strategy, this is also very important for a country like Ireland because most of the methane emissions come from agriculture and notably from livestock. An offshore strategy, a renovation wave, etc. I'm going to give you some more details about the circular economy and the renovation wave later. It is very important to mention, and I want this to be one of the key messages of my presentation, that now is time to implement. So the Commission can present fantastic plans, fantastic strategies, but at the end of the day, we need to implement all this. And this is why the European Green Deal came and coupled with an investment plan, with the idea of mobilizing 1 trillion euros of investment. And as I was saying now, okay, don't believe that this is money that will come from the European Union. So the idea here is to create, with the European investments, a leverage for both public and private investments. So the idea under this investment plan was to dedicate 25% of all European Union funding for climate measures, to dedicate 30% of the InvestEU to projects that fight climate change, and to stimulate green investments from the European Investment Bank. You see that there is still a certain bias towards climate, but at the end of the day, these investments on climate will have also good impacts on other environmental areas. I mentioned also that, I think I missed a slide because I wanted to mention also the just transition mechanism, but I see that I didn't add a slide that I used to put. So one of the important elements of the Green Deal and the European Green Deal investment plan was this idea of the just transition. And this investment plan included a just transition mechanism to help really the areas that have a risk of lagging behind. So we are talking here about changing radically our way of consuming and producing. And of course, there are going to be winners and losers. And we need potential losers. For example, people working in areas like coal, or in the case of Ireland, pits. Sources of this is likely to have a very negative economic impact and social impact on the people working in these sectors. And this is why there is this just transition mechanism. So the idea is to mobilize 100 billion for this transition mechanism, giving financial support, which is at the end the most important, transition plans, and technical assistance. As I mentioned before, this was what I presented now was what was foreseen at the beginning when the European Green Deal was presented. But then we had the growth strategy, and then it must be our recovery strategy. And you follow in the newspapers, after very long discussions with member states, there was the Recovery and Resilience Facility that was presented with almost 700 billion, 300 in grants, 360 in loans. How this money is going to be distributed? It will be based on national plans. The Commission is already receiving these plans or these drafts and giving recommendations. And these plans must be coherent with the Green Deal. And with the digitalization objective of the priorities of the Commission. And here again, there is a very strong do not harm principle. So there are member states presenting actions then that can have an impact, for example, on biodiversity or on air pollution. And the Commission has already presented guidelines to the member states on the situations that have to be avoided or that can be accepted only under certain conditions. A typical case is gas. So natural gas is something that we need for the transition, but at the same time, natural gas is a fossil fuel, it produces emissions, pollutants, etc. So we have to avoid that the investments in gas create a lock-in effect, so that at the end we create pipelines, we create infrastructures, and we are going to be obliged for decades to use natural gas. So in this case, for example, the Commission talks about future-proofed infrastructures that can be used for biogas or for hydrogen. The RRF, the Recovery and Resilience Facility, combines investments and reforms. This is also very important because there must be a consistency between both. I announced already that I'm going to give you two examples. One is the circular economy. What is the challenge? So, as you can see, and this at the end is a consequence of the expansion of the global population and of the number of people, the 140 million people reaching the medium class every year. We know that the annual extraction of materials, of natural resources, have tripled in the last decades. At the same time, the EU industry accounts for 20% of the European Union emissions. More than 90% of biodiversity loss and water straits comes from resource extraction and processing. And as I mentioned, only 12% of the materials we are using in our economy are recycled. So this is the challenge that I already anticipated before. So this is a slide that I like to use every time. I hope it's going to work. So this is what you can see in the image is the traditional linear economy. So we extract product, we transform them, we transport, we consume, and they go to waste. And this is the model that we want to define. We consume, but the consumption can be shared, and what we have using can be repaired. Technology is something that has to go to the bin. But we have to minimize this waste. And once we have to valorize it for energy, if recycled, etc. And this implies many changes, even in the legislation. So we need to improve or to create the incentives to better designs for longer life of the products, for the possibility of reusing part of the materials or recycling the material, the products, etc. So the Commission already presented a circular economy action plan in 2015. It was the same year than the Paris Agreement and the Sustainable Development Goals, so a very important year for environment. And you can see here that these data are a little bit outdated. I think this comes from the report we did in 2018. So this data, but you see, we can demonstrate that there is employment increasing in the circular economy, added value, investment, and are increasing the recycling and reuse of secondary raw materials. And we expect that these trends are going to continue. So all the actions that were presented in this initial circular action plan were already accomplished, and under the Green Deal, the Commission published a new one, focusing efforts on these sectors that you can see here: textiles, construction, electronics, plastics, and with a very important element, which is that we want to empower the consumers. So we want to give more transparent information to the consumers about what they are buying. And these different studies show that this is also very, very important. And we know that we can create a virtuous circle between a well-informed decision of a consumer who can go to the supermarket or to his shop and say, okay, I have these products, this has a lower footprint, and even if it's a little bit more expensive, I prefer this one. And this pushes also enterprises to be greener and to be more responsible. But we have to create the legal framework to favorize this. So we want really to create or to support these new business models to create a virtuous circle. Yes, it was in this slide. So empower consumers and to measures to encourage business to be more responsible. This is, I think, my last slide. I mentioned before the renovation wave. Let me explain you briefly what is it about. This is really, so in the analysis of the Commission about what we have to change to reach carbon neutrality by 2050 or to increase the targets by 2030, One of the areas that is lagging behind is energy efficiency. So there was an objective by 2020 of increasing energy efficiency by 20%. So this means reducing energy consumption by 20%, and is going to be reached because of the pandemics. So we were at 18%, something like this. So there are more efforts to be done on energy efficiency, and all the energy legislation of the European Union relies on the principle energy efficiency first. So the less harmful energy that we can use is the one we don't use. If we can avoid the consumption, sometimes with small things, so changing our lamps, or shutting off the light when we go to another room, but sometimes also with making investments. And one of the areas of investments where more can be done is with the building stock. The building stock in Europe is not energy efficient, and we need to renovate this building stock. This was already in the Energy Efficiency Directive that is now under review, but it's necessary to provide additional support. And if we look at the Commission presented a renovation wave communication to promote this renovation of buildings, focusing not only on energy efficiency, but energy and resource efficiency. And now what we are seeing is that in the national recovery and resilience plan, most countries, if not all, are proposing actions to renovate buildings. And this has also very good potential impacts on other environmental areas. It's not a matter of reducing energy and resource use and then GHG emissions. It's also a matter of reducing other emissions, air pollutants, or of making the households more affordable, reduce, for example, energy poverty, a big problem in Europe. And this renovation wave, again, goes beyond the only energy efficiency. It includes also circularity, life cycle thinking. So can we reuse materials? Can we design our buildings in a way that we can, in the future, keep the carbon of cement or other materials embedded? So you see in this picture that there are different objectives that have to be reached with the renovation wave. And this is a big opportunity, so happy to, if you have questions, to discuss more about this. So these are my conclusions. First conclusion, remember, is not here, but remember that the Green Deal is not only about climate, it has to be systemic, it has to address the four major environmental crises, and it includes this do not harm principle. Second message, it is time to implement, so we cannot stay in the plans and in the strategies. We need projects, we need action. And for this, the role of national, regional, and local administrations, but as well as stakeholders, so industry, enterprises, NGOs, citizens themselves, is going to be key. And for this reason, I think that an event like this one is really very, very important to implement the Green Deal. And finally, the recovery facility, the recovery and resilience facility, is a big opportunity. And we have to be fast. So we have to be fast for two reasons. The first one is because we have to get rid of the crisis, not only of the health crisis, but of the economic crisis. And the second one is because now there is a lot of money. In the next 2 years, we don't know if we are going to have enough money. So if you are thinking on projects, you have to be fast to present them. So thank you very much. And as I said, I will be very happy to have questions and to, if not today, to discuss them afterwards by email. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you, Jesus, for this very interesting presentation. I don't know if there are questions. I would suggest that those who have questions raise their hands so that I can give them the floor, or drop the question in the chat box. But perhaps while participants are thinking of questions, I could perhaps give the floor to Mr. McDonald, who is with us, to say a few words. So, Mr. McDonald, I will, you may unmute yourself and you may take the floor.
Good morning, everybody. Can you hear me?
Very good. Thank you.
Okay. Good morning, everyone. Apologies for the technology problems earlier, but can I take this opportunity to welcome everyone to our Green Deal seminar. I'm really looking forward to hearing an exchange of views with speakers, attendees and colleagues throughout the week. For those who don't know me, my name is Councillor Declan MacDonald, and like my esteemed colleagues on the panel this morning, I am not a climate expert or an innovation leader, but I am fortunate to work with kind of rogue band of passionate custodians, overseeing the strategy and sustainability development of our region. Here, of course, I refer to my esteemed colleagues and officials with the Northern and Western Regional Assembly. I have many hats and identities, and I embrace them all. I'm proud to be from Galway City, but I'm also proud to be a European. I'm here today as I'm also a member of the Northern and Western Assembly, a former chairperson, in fact, in 2020, and importantly a member of the Committee of the Regions. The Committee of the Regions is a voice for regional and local government and for regional and local communities in Brussels. I'm also a member of the European Alliance group in the Committee of the Regions. This region faces many challenges. Despite the country's economic success, a very uneven pattern of economic success can be identified where some of the areas are benefiting significantly less than our capital region. This presents a less positive micro picture of economic success. From my perspective, there is a startling and widening chasm of regional inequality in Ireland. On many simple measures, such as gross domestic product, Ireland has one of the most regional, unequal economies across Europe. This is most accurately felt in our region, in the western border area. These difficulties were reflected in the European Commission to downgrade the northern and western regions from a more developed region to a transition region post-2020, the only region in Ireland to hold such a status. In addition, the European Parliament Committee on Regional Development has categorised the region as a lagging region, which is a region characterised by extremely low growth, which is divergent from the rest of the country. Compounding this, signals indicate that the region can be expected to experience a more complex and long-term recovery from the current pandemic crisis. So we need to ask the question, are we being left behind? And what do we do? The Green Deal is something we're going to hear a lot more about. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen
Sir, there is an interruption. I think you are muted again. There is an
okay
echo.
now.
Yeah.
Okay again. But for this region, it is a timely North Star. COVID-19 has accelerated our need for good decision making. Earlier than expected, we are confronted with a choice, whether to only treat the symptoms of the existing pandemic or to take this opportunity and also create the paradigm shift to prepare against future shocks. We are planning for the paradigm shift, and this Green Deal series is part of a region-wide dialogue. We are armed now with an aggressive regional, spatial and economic strategy that has the Green Deal as its core. We now need to deliver I will finish now by thanking all our attendees for registering. Over 170 in total. I would also like to particularly thank our impressive list of speakers throughout the year, to thank Jesus who spoke there on the Green Deal. Finally, can I acknowledge the European Commission in Brussels and Dublin for facilitating us today, and to thank you and apologise that technology didn't allow me in earlier. I wish every success to all 3 days, Monday, Wednesday and Friday. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McDonald. There has indeed been a slight echo problem because I see you had two devices open, but I'm sure the message is well received. It was clear enough, and of course it has also been recorded for those who want to listen to it again.
Thank you.
I'm not sure whether now there are questions for Jesus Alcazar. He is still with us? No?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, very good. Yeah, okay. Are there questions, or is everything crystal clear? I don't see hands raised, nor do I see questions in the chat box, but I see one message: crystal clear, good and clear presentation from Jesus. So Jesus, thank you very much. We will, if we may, Jesus, share your presentation with the participants to it.
Yes, please. And okay. I'm going to stay to follow the next presentation. So if there is a question that comes to your mind, please do. So yeah. I'm here.
Great.
So muted without image, but I'm here.
Great.
Thank you very much to all. Thank you.
There is one question, Jesus, I see from Barry Gakyan. Some very intriguing strategies referred to in the presentation. Is there a central location where those can be accessed?
Good question, because I'm not sure there is a central website where you can find all of them, but I'm going to check, because perhaps there is. Because in my case, for example, when I go to see something on climate, I go directly to the website of DG Klima. But I'm going to check, and if I find it, I add it in the chat, the link.
That's great. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I see that our next speaker, Quentin Duprieux, is already with us. Quentin, that's true, no?
Sorry, I had to unplug my earphones for a second, so I didn't hear your question about what is true.
No, I was just, I saw that you were already with us, so I wonder whether you would like to start your presentation.
Of course.
I don't know if you have, you have a PowerPoint, no?
I have a PowerPoint, yes.
Let me make you presenter so that you can take the lead.
Yes, because I can see it. I'm not allowed to share now. Oh yes.
Yes, but you will
No,
soon
I can.
be allowed to do so. Yeah, it should be fine now. I see Jesus that while Quentin is loading his presentation, there is another question in the chat box for you by Paul O'Rourke.
Yes. Yes, on the circular economy, I'm going to send you also a link where you can find all the information. This one is more under my control. So I'm going to add both links in the chat in a couple of minutes.
Wonderful. Thank you, Jesus. Thank you, Quentin, for being with us. I suggest, well, I will give you the floor immediately so that perhaps before the next presentation, we can have a short break. Those who have questions, they can still continue to drop the questions in the chat box. Also for you, Quentin, I will be keeping an eye on the chat box, but of course, participants can also raise their hands should they have a question during your presentation. So please, I will give you the floor and I will mute myself.
Very good. Can you see my screen, the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes.
Okay, I turned off my cameras, to avoid overloading the network. I think it usually is better to turn off the camera.
Yeah, I will just add this for those who have joined us. It would be great if you could all close down all the applications on your computer that you are not needed for the time being, and also please switch off your cameras because this helps and to improve the web connection.
Very good. Well, thank you for inviting me to present the EU climate policy. And this morning, it's always a pleasure to do that to stakeholders in Ireland and elsewhere. So what I'd like to focus my presentation on, and please feel free to interrupt me at any time. I'm very happy to take any questions either at the end or whenever you feel like it's necessary. If there's something that you would like me to clarify at any point, feel free to do so. And Fabienne can moderate that discussion if necessary. So I'd like to focus my presentation on a little bit just on the current climate policy, but then focus on what the Commission is now focusing on in terms of its the update of its 2030 climate ambition, which is what everybody's busy working on at the Commission, or a lot of people are busy working on at the Commission, and which is obviously the focus of attention because that is what is going to drive us at least for the next 10 years. So the current situation is that we have climate and energy legislation that is in place that aims to reduce total greenhouse gas emissions by at least 40% in 2030 compared to the levels of 1990 emissions. And that is accompanied, so this is the NDC that was valid until a few weeks ago that we had submitted to the UNFCCC. There was an EU contribution to the Paris Agreement, a minimum of at least 40% reduction in GHG. That was backed by a full legislative framework on the climate side, mainly the EU ETS, the emissions trading system, the effort sharing regulation that sets ambitions at the member state level for all the sectors that are not covered by the EU ETS, and the LULUCF, the land use change and forestry regulation, as well as the regulation that sets CO2 standards for vehicles. There was also legislation on the energy side. I've just put the Renewables Energy Directive, the Revision 2, the Energy Efficiency Directive, and the Energy Performance in Building Directive, and there are others in the energy field that I don't want to get into the details of those. So the 40% ambition was backed by an ambition to have a 32% share of renewables in the production of and the use of energy, of final energy consumption, and an improvement in energy efficiency of 32.5%. Now, as part of her political ambition, our President von der Leyen, indicated that she would aim to increase the ambition and set up the Green Deal, which Jesus has presented already in some details. The updated climate ambition is a key component of that Green Deal, and that in September last year, the Commission indicated, well, it issued an impact assessment and a communication indicating that we would propose an increase in the climate ambition by 2030 to 55%, so reducing greenhouse gas emissions compared to 1990 levels by 55% on a net basis, that is including removals from the LULUCF sector. So this was done really as a response to the climate emergency, which is both political, it is social, it is economic, and it is obviously environmental. I don't know how the weather has been in Ireland these days, but in Belgium we went from -10 to plus 17 degrees in a matter of a week, essentially. So we are seeing the impact of climate change. This is obviously anecdotal, what I just mentioned, but we are seeing scientifically the proof that climate change is happening, and we are now at about 1 degree Celsius high above pre-industrial levels already on average over the past decades. So there's a clear need to act very forcefully, very quickly on climate, and what the Commission determined was that in order to achieve the climate neutrality objective by 2050, which was already set, which had been adopted by the European Council more than a year ago now, it was important to accelerate our transition to climate neutrality. Now, as I mentioned, in September, we issued a first look at what a target of 55% would entail, and we proposed that as a Commission proposal for adoption by the European Council. Now, what that meant, we should have a full impact assessment, a detailed look at what achieving 55% would mean in terms of sectoral contribution, in terms of impact on our economies. So I'll just very briefly go through that before then going into somewhat more detail as to what that would mean in terms of our legislation, climate legislation, and climate policy. So achieving 55% by 2030 means that all sectors of the economy would have to contribute. 55% is a very ambitious target, and it can only be achieved if absolutely every single sector of the economy is involved in that transition. Some obviously would contribute more than others, are in a position to contribute more and faster, even though, again, by 2050, the objective is to be climate neutral and have net zero greenhouse gas emissions. So all sectors will have to go through a deep transition, but some can contribute faster than others in our 30 years that remain to 2050. Energy supply, so power generation, essentially, is the sector that probably has the highest potential based on the current available technologies to achieve fast reductions in greenhouse gas emissions. So what we determined was that a cost-efficient way to achieve the 55% target would be to reduce emissions from energy supply by around 75 compared to levels in 2005. That is clearly driven also by the ETS and the price on carbon that it imposes on power generation. It is also driven to a large extent by the phase out of coal technologies, peat technologies, as we have seen now in Ireland with the closure of the peat power plants, and obviously the replacement of these fossil fuel-based technologies for power generation with renewables, for which Ireland also has very high potential, mainly in onshore and offshore wind. But the potential is there. We know how to generate very sharp reductions in power generation of emissions in power generation with current technologies which are now reliable and have whose costs have really been driven down dramatically over the past decade, also as a result of EU policies. The residential sector is also a very important sector. It's a very large emitter across the EU as a result of its energy consumption, both for mainly for heating and for some countries in cooling as well. And there is still a large use of fossil fuels in residential heating in many countries. So there we estimated that the potential contribution to the 55% target would be a reduction of around 70% in emissions compared to 2005, driven by increased renovation, insulation of buildings, and higher share of renewables in both the heating and cooling of the residential sector. So that means switching fuels, moving away from coal in countries that still use coal or peat, and moving towards renewables and electricity to a large extent. So that means both changing the district heating systems that for countries that have district heating, or shifting to heat pumps using electricity where it is possible. The tertiary sector is also mainly building sector, also has a big potential to reduce emissions. We estimate it will be about 60% compared to 2005 levels. Now, a sector that has less potential, at least in the short term, which will need to decarbonize and contribute as well, but has a bit less potential in the next 10 years, will be industry and transport, where we believe that 40% reductions can be achieved compared to 2005 in industry and 20% in transport. Clearly, our transport is still very much reliant on fossil fuels, on diesel and petrol. But again, we see that there is a need for transport to also decarbonize it, to start decarbonizing immediately so that we can achieve climate neutrality by 2050. In order to make this possible for industry and transport to decarbonize, we also see that there's a need to innovate today, so that by 2050 we are in a position to have decarbonized steel, decarbonized industrial goods, and decarbonized transport. Non-CO2, and this will be certainly very relevant for you in Ireland, because that includes, Ireland is one of the member states that has the highest share of non-CO2 emissions, essentially mostly biomethane emissions, that this non-CO2 emissions would also have to contribute. And we see that there is a potential to reduce by 40%. We see that there is a potential to reduce by 40% compared to 2005. What we see is that the sink, at least at EU level, remains significant, even though it has been decreasing in recent years, but still the sink will be important, both by the horizon 2030 and by the horizon 2050, in order for us to be able to achieve climate neutrality, because we will not be able to eliminate all emissions. There will be residual emissions even in 2050. So we need to have absorptions from the LULUCF sector in order to achieve the net zero emissions by 2050. Now, in the impact assessment that we published in September, we looked at this broad 55% target and what it would mean for GDP and employment. What we saw that in general, the impact would be relatively limited. Depending on the type of modeling approaches that you use, depending on some assumptions that are made on the economy, we saw that the impact on output on GDP, which is again admittedly a very broad and imperfect metric of economic impact, we saw that the impact would be either a small positive or a small negative. But clearly the transition is not what is going to have the biggest effect on the level of GDP. We have a lot of effects and significant effects, deep-rooted effects in the structure of our economies, but not so much on the level of output. And we also saw that in the context of underemployment, which is clearly where we are now in a post-COVID world, there can be positive employment if the transition is accompanied by a tax shift. So away from the current taxation model that's still puts a lot of burden on labor taxes and towards environmental taxes. Now, if the headline impact on GDP was deemed to be or estimated to be relatively small, clearly the transition entails very major transformational challenges and changes. Some sectors clearly will shrink significantly. The peat extraction sector, for example, in Ireland is a very obvious example. Ireland will be affected, other countries will be affected to a much more significant effect if you think of Poland and other Romania, Bulgaria, that still extract a fair bit of coal and base the energy system a lot on coal. Clearly, these are countries that will be affected similarly to what Ireland is experiencing with peat and the closure of the peat extraction and the closure of the peat-based power plants. You can multiply this to a factor 10, and this is what you basically see potentially happening in Poland or Romania. Some sectors will need to transform. We will need to produce cars differently. We will not be producing the same cars as we do. It will no longer be internal combustion engines. It will be cars based on electric powertrains. So a different kind of transformation. And we will transform steel production, we will transform cement, we will transform a whole range of sectors in order to reduce their emissions. And some sectors will grow. The obvious case that everybody can think of is electricity generation. There will be a higher demand for electricity. There's a big potential to develop the renewables electricity sector in Ireland. There's a big potential in wind power generation. We also looked at the social impacts and are very much aware of the risks of regressive impacts. So the poorer households being affected more than others. And we are also very much aware that this transformation, when you transform the way you produce things and what you produce, clearly that means that there will be training needs. Workers will have to do different things. People working in Bornamona doing peat extraction will have to find new jobs. They will need to be undertaking reskilling and upskilling. But these effects, both on the training side and the regressive impacts in terms of income, can be addressed also with the redistribution of carbon revenue, particularly if we increase the scope of sectors that are subject to carbon pricing. Given all of this, we are aware of the social challenges and that the transition will have to be fair, or will basically not be possible, will not be sustainable. The Commission has really very much this no one left behind concept in mind in all its policies, and put in place the just transition mechanism to address the particular needs of people who will be most affected, the regions that will be most affected by the transition. But we also see very significant co-benefits in terms of lower pollution, improved quality of life, in terms of improved health indicators. Clearly, if you pollute a lot less in our urban areas, given the scale of the impacts of air pollution on everybody basically, but also on our youth, that clearly has very positive health impact in the long term. Another thing that we were particularly conscious of is that transitioning to a 55% target in 2030 and climate neutrality will entail big investment needs. There is a sustained investment effort that will be required, both to produce renewables, to upgrade the quality of our grid, to put smart grids in place, electricity grids, to renovate our buildings, to change our transport modes, increase public transport, change our individual transports towards electric cars, and the need to invest in industry in order to decarbonize industry. We estimated, and the chart here shows the blue bars is basically the blue part of the bars in each of the sectors shows the historic annual investment that what we've invested basically over the past decade. The gray bar would show you what the increment that will be needed, or what we estimated the increment to be needed to achieve the 40% target, and the green bar, the additional step still on top of the gray bar that will be needed to achieve the 55% target. So you see that there's a fair bit of additional investment that will be needed, a step up, also very importantly in the residential and tertiary sectors, where there's a big need for renovation, and that entails a significant level of investment. What we saw is that the COVID crisis does not reduce these needs. It affects the capacity of businesses and households to invest, probably, most likely, but it does not reduce the need to invest in order to achieve the 55% target, because these needs are driven by the target itself, not by the level of activity as such. So in order to drive this investment, there's a clear need for signals provided by policymakers and for direct public support. In terms of the signals, carbon pricing is a key driver. Obviously, we have seen now it in Ireland with Budget 2021 showing a clear path towards the €100 carbon price by 2030, with annual increments that have now been defined in Budget 2021. This carbon pricing is also done at the EU level with the EU ETS. It has been a major driver of climate policy. It's been one of the key building blocks of climate policy at the EU level for quite a while now. There's also the need for a legal framework that prepares the economic agents to do the right kind of investment via regulations, via the development of sustainable finance, the taxonomy of what constitutes sustainable finance, and the mainstreaming of climate policy and climate targets in all EU policies. Now, at the EU level, the Resilience and Recovery Facility, which is a major instrument now in order to address the fallout, the economic fallout of the pandemic, is a major instrument. It's going to in Ireland, it is probably smaller proportionately than in other countries, given the wealth of Ireland, the relative wealth compared to other countries in the EU. It's about €1 billion of grants that will be made available to Ireland in order to facilitate the recovery and the resilience of the economy. And there's this 37% requirement that all member states invest in climate relevant projects for all the funds provided under the Recovery and Resilience Facility. The MFF, the Multi-Financial Framework, Annual Financial Framework, the EU budget, essentially also has a mainstreaming objective of 25% of all EU budget being spent on climate relevant issues. The Horizon Europe, which is the innovation and technology instrument, the Innovation Fund, which is funded by the revenues from the sale of EU ETS allowances, and the state aid framework are key in terms of the framework that will define our ability to drive the kind of investment that is needed. And under the chapeau over all of this is the do no harm principle, which applies fully to all projects under the RRF, the Resilience and Recovery Facility, meaning that every single project funded from the EU budget, from the RRF, will have to comply with the do no harm principle, basically making sure that any project has no negative implications, not just on climate, but on other environmental objectives. So driving the green economic transformation calls for a combination of key policy factors. One is economic incentives. I just mentioned carbon pricing, and the ETS is a key component in that respect, and it is going to be reformed, and I will get into that in a moment. There's the Energy Tax Directive, which is also currently being reviewed to improve the economic incentives and to move away and to remove some fossil fuel subsidies. And then there's a carbon border adjustment mechanism, which is another tool at the disposal of the EU, which is being considered in order to make sure that our efforts are not defeated by carbon leakage, basically products being produced elsewhere and imported back in the EU, produced elsewhere at higher carbon intensity and then being imported back into the EU. The regulatory instruments are, at least as climate policy are concerned, are mainly the effort sharing regulation, which defines objectives at member state level, which member states have to devise their own policies in order to achieve the broad objective set at national level under the EU context, and the LULUCF regulation that defines what can be done with the within the land use and land use change sector. Still on the regulation side, the CO2 in car regulation has been a key instrument for the EU to improve fuel efficiency in vehicles, both for light-duty vehicles and heavy-duty vehicles, and the two energy directives, energy-related directives that I mentioned, the Renewable Energy Directive and the Energy Efficiency Directive, which also will be reviewed, have also been key driver in ensuring that that there is a higher penetration of renewables and a higher development of renewable and bigger efforts to drive energy efficiency. In terms of the enabling environment, as I mentioned, there is the EU funding instruments, there is sectoral strategies, which are relevant for the hydrogen, the development of the hydrogen sector, which has has a lot of potential to be fully decarbonized in its production via renewables-based electrolysis, which can then serve as an alternative fuel for a range of processes, including transport. There is the offshore energy strategy, the circular economy strategy, which I believe Jesus has talked about, the smart mobility strategy, which is being developed by our colleagues in DG Move, and the sustainable finance, EU taxonomy and state aid framework, which I've already mentioned. Now, in terms of the update of the legislative framework, given that we've set this 55% objective, which has been endorsed by the EU Council, now the Commission is very busy trying to back this up with this objective. That's an objective. It's very fun to have an objective. Now you need to have the instruments to achieve that objective. So the legislative framework on climate and energy will be updated. A key component of that will again be the EU ETS, which will have to be strengthened. The cap on emissions will be lowered, and the market stability reserve, which sort of is an instrument to absorb whatever excess or deficit of allowances is in the market, is also going to be reviewed. We see important benefits, and we indicated that in the impact assessment of September already. We see important benefits in expanding the EU emissions trading system to new sectors, which would mainly be road transport and buildings. So any emissions from road transport and building would be covered under system. Either that would be the same, could be potentially, again, these are things we're looking at now, could be integrated in the current ETS system, either immediately or through a phasing period, but clearly it would be a full carbon pricing applying to road transport and buildings, to all emissions from road transport and buildings. This is a way to achieve emissions reduction cost effectively, because you put a price on carbon and then you don't determine how emissions need to be reduced. I know you let the market determine that. And it's also a way to reinvest revenues that are generated from the carbon pricing to stimulate growth, ensure environmental integrity in the form of the emissions cap, because once you have a cap, you know for sure that cap will be there and will be met, because you will not issue allowances above that cap by 2030, and that drives the level of emissions in 2030. It's not just a carbon tax, which is a tax. You determine the tax, and then you're not quite sure what the market will actually generate in terms of reductions in emissions for that carbon price via a tax, but via an ETS system. You both put a price in carbon and have make sure that you reach the cap, the target, by the date that you've set. Clearly, carbon pricing does not address all the barriers. We will need to supplement that with renewable energy, energy efficiency, and transport policies and standards, also as a way to ensure that the price of ETS allowances, the carbon price, is not excessively high. Basically, you want to know the more policy you have to put in place in order to also make sure that renewables are supported, are developed, the more you can ensure that carbon prices remain are basically kept at a reasonable level. We are fully aware, as I mentioned already, of the distributional impacts on households and potentially on member states as well, that lower incomes are likely to bear a higher burden because of the structure of their revenue and expenditure, but this can be addressed, including by the use of the auctioning revenues. And this is already done in the EU, both in terms of distribution across households and across member states. But how this will be done, then this is clearly something that will have to be seen in the proposal that we will table later in the year. The effort sharing regulation, which covers all greenhouse gases from transport, agriculture, buildings, waste, are not regulated currently under the EU ETS. If transport and buildings are integrated, then clearly that would affect the scope of the effort sharing regulation. And the Commission is currently considering in proposals that it will table in June how a reviewed effort sharing regulation and an updated EU ETS would overlap, and what would basically be the optimal solution between potentially reducing the scope of the effort sharing regulation because you've transferred buildings and transport into the ETS, or potentially also keeping an overlap. This is another possibility. There's also the issue of agriculture. Agriculture emissions will certainly not be put into the ETS. That is obviously not considered. So they will remain under effort sharing regulation as it currently stands. But if the LULUCF regulation itself is modified and turned into an absolute regulation, a regulation that covers the whole land sector, including agriculture, then you could have one single sector that covers both LULUCF and agriculture. You could then consider how to set targets for that sort of broader sector and potentially then taking it out of the effort sharing regulation. But it's what is key is that it's still, regardless of the extent to which the ETS regulation is extended in scope, it's important to maintain strong incentives and accountability for each and every member state to ensure action at national level. Because the EU can drive a fair bit of the climate policy, but member states have a clearly essential role to play. So it's very important to keep these the incentives there to have national policies on top of EU policies. So the current LULUCF regulation will also be looked at, is being looked at. And the difference that we have in the target, the 55% target that we have now compared to the 40% target, is that all removals, so all absorptions of carbon from the LULUCF sector are integrated into a net target. Because our net target for 2050, our target for 2050 is on a net basis. So we decided it was time, given the revision of the target, to have also by 2030 a target that is on a net basis, because that is really what we are now. It's the trajectory that we are setting ourselves to by 2050, which is a net target. So it's integrated into the 55% target, and we are in the process of reviewing the LULUCF regulation as well. There are clearly strong synergies and trade-offs with biodiversity. I'm sure Jesus must have mentioned that as well. And the use of biomass is an important element into that, and the extent to which biomass is used as an input into our energy system clearly has implications not just for the energy system, but also for biodiversity and the environment in general. So this is clearly being taken into account, and it is an important factor in climate policy as well. In the agriculture sector, the Commission is also looking now at ways to develop a certification system for carbon removals, because we know that the agriculture sector itself is an emitter of carbon, but of greenhouse gas emissions, but it also potentially a way that there's a potential to foster carbon removal in the farming sector. And as I mentioned, over time, the Commission will look at the merit of potentially integrating agriculture, forestry, and land into a single regulated sector, which would have its own target. Regulated sector, which would have. And I'll go relatively quickly through the update of the legislative framework for renewable energy and efficiency. Because this is not it's not directly climate policy, but it drives our ability to achieve the climate target. What we determine in the impact assessment that we would need to have that renewable energy would need to represent about 38 to 40% of our final energy consumption, and we will strengthen the renewable energy directive in order to achieve this higher ambition. The same thing in terms of energy efficiency. Energy efficiency, any energy you don't consume, energy that you don't need to produce. And given that some of this energy still is on the basis of fossil fuels, clearly consuming less energy is cost efficient and enables us to reduce the level of emissions. We are also in the process of reviewing the
Yeah, Quentin, yes, there is Mr. Ronan Giggles has raised his hand, and he has also put a question in the chat box.
Oh, yes.
And so did Mr. Paul O'Rourke. So I'm not sure whether you can take these questions now. I will give Mr. Giggles the floor, perhaps.
Yeah, with the power.
Yes, sorry to interrupt. My question is just in relation.
No, please do.
Yes, sorry. My question was just in relation to just transition, which until now is associated purely with fossil fuel dependent regions like the Midlands, with some talk of part of West County Clare in the future. But I mean, my question is it seen as a policy driver more generally to be applied through future policy instruments, funding programs, essentially in a more diluted manner, or will it be restricted to its current interpretation in other across Europe, essentially?
Well, the Just Transition Fund itself indeed is focused, is a rather focused instrument that seeks to address the needs of the sector, of the region transition. So mainly the sector, the regions that will be affected by by coal phase out and the implications of having to shut activities that are high emitters of greenhouse gases. So that is the Just Transition Fund. The envelope has for most important to focus that on really the regions with the highest needs. So yes, so the fund itself at the EU level is regionally focused because it was aimed to address a specific need. Now the concept of a just transition is not restricted to the regions that have been identified as being eligible for the funds under the EU Just Transition Fund, because there's an Irish Just Transition Fund as well. But I want to make sure that it's clear that it's the EU Just Transition Fund. So yes, but the concept of leaving no one behind and ensuring that EU programs make us achieve that objective is an EU-wide objective. It is not restricted to the regions that have been identified as being eligible for the Just Transition Fund. So it's yes, there's two slightly different. One is really funding this very specific needs of everyone, and you see this in the recovery, which has, and one of them is a social component that addresses training needs, and that this is the RRF is well, it's up to the member states to provide their resilience and recovery plans to identify the best way the EU and there's the concept of supporting a just transition, the green transition, the digital transition is completely inherent to the RRF and the EU structural funds in general. Yes. I'm not sure that fully answers your question.
No, thank you. Yeah, it's the concept, the spirit, the spirit of the law rather than the letter of the law. I'm interested in. I understand the fund and the mechanism are very specific, very focused. And
sorry, yes, I mean I'm aware that Ireland or the Irish authorities have engaged in discussions with the European Commission to try to widen the regional scope of eligibility under the Just Transition Fund. There have been discussions. It's the Just Transition Fund regulation has a more limited regional scope, but I'm aware that the Irish authorities have indicated an interest in widening the regional eligibility. Now, I cannot tell you where these discussions stand at this stage, but I'm aware of the desire that has been expressed by the Irish government.
Sure, I
given
suppose
the existence already of the.
I suppose my question is as much in relation. Maybe we'll find out later. It's in relation to seeing this reflected in life or Horizon Europe for, say, communities in Galway or Sligo or Letterkenny, which are outside the territory as currently drawn, that the social aspects of energy transition at a community level would be reflected more generally.
Yes, I mean, I imagine a lot of that will be, whether it's in under the LIFE projects, or and I think the colleague from DG Environment will present the LIFE program in detail, and you might ask him that question. But in terms of all the regional funds, this is really, and the RRF, this is very much driven by the plans that are drawn by the national authorities themselves. So the extent to which the EU funds are then channeled across regions in Ireland, I think a lot of that will be also driven by the recovery plan that will be submitted by the Irish authorities.
Yes, very good. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Sorry, Fabian, you mentioned there was another question?
Yes, indeed, there is by Mr. Paul Raw. Let me have a look. Paul Raw. Can the EU lead the way in developing a better metric of national progress and well-being, as the focus on GDP is actually part of the crisis we are now addressing? And he then asks if the carbon price is the same as carbon tax. So two questions from Mr. Paul O'Rourke.
Yes.
They're in the chat box, actually.
Let's start with the carbon price and the carbon tax. The point is that I can't seem to see the chat box when I do the presentation.
Okay, of course, yes. But you know what? I will give him the floor. Perhaps that's.
So but that's okay.
It's okay.
I mean, I can answer the question if I.
All right, good, wonderful.
I understand the question from. I mean, he can add to that if need me, but. Carbon tax. Carbon tax, no. And it is certainly not the same as the Irish carbon tax, which comes on top of the EU ETS. So a carbon tax, conceptually, you basically determine a level of tax. You say you pay 40 euros or 45 euro, 50 euros per ton of CO2 emitted, and no matter what, and that is fixed over time. Under the EU ETS, what you do is you set the current EU ETS and say all emissions from power generation. So any emitter of carbon from power generation needs to buy allowances, a permit to issue 1 ton of CO2 emissions. And you buy that permit on the market. And the cost of that permit is driven by the market. So if there's a shortage, if there's a high demand for allowances, if too many people still use, let's say, coal or peat or gas to generate power, there's more demand for a given level of allowances that is provided every year. So the price will fluctuate. It is not a tax which is set at a given level and that is it. It does not move. So you pay whatever the tax says, and that's it. Under the EU ETS, you have to buy the allowances on the market, and the market determines the value of the carbon price. Under a carbon tax, if you say we set the carbon tax at 45, economic agents are allowed to emit any amount of CO2 emissions as long as they pay the tax. Under an EU ETS, you put at the EU level a cap, a given amount of emissions allowances that are given every year. And that given number of allowances of tons of CO2 that can be emitted every year falls over time. So you know that in 2030, the EU will issue a given level of can be emitted by the ETS sectors, and that's it. The tax would not achieve that. The tax would say, well, if at that cost agents emit this much, that is what it is. Was under the cap, the carbon price, under the ETS, you know that the emissions will be at the cap, no more, unless people have saved emissions allowances from the past. But that's another matter. It's a small issue, I would say. So that's the difference between a carbon tax and an ETS system, which is a cap and trade system. Now, the carbon tax that is applied in Ireland does not exist. Agents in the ETS sector in Ireland does not exonerate them from the carbon price they pay on the EU ETS, or the need for them to buy emissions allowances under the ETS. So they're two separate things, and conceptually a bit different. Now, in terms of the GDP metric, yes, I think everybody agrees that it is a supremely imperfect metric. Ireland and elsewhere, I think, given the role of multinational that have inflated GDP, and I know this has been a long-standing discussion in Ireland, the extent to which GDP actually reflects the wealth and the level of income in the Irish economy, and that is why the CSO developed the GNI star indicator, which is still basically an indicator of value added, which is still, in a way, it compensates for some oddities in the GDP numbers in Ireland, but it doesn't change the nature of the metric itself. So it's a long-standing debate in economics. Nobody's been able to fully devise a single synthetic indicator that synthesizes the size of an economy. But I think I fully agree that all the metrics are very important, are very relevant, whether you measure them in terms of quality of life, in terms of quality of the environment, impact on the environment, resource extraction, sustainability of the resource extraction. These are all extremely relevant indicators, which I think are kept in power. Well, I think the Commission and also the United Nations are trying to capture that with the sustainable development goals and the indicators that are used to assess progress towards the SDGs. I think there's a whole range of other metrics in terms of health, in terms of education, in terms of distribution of income. These are all very relevant indicators. You need to look at a whole range of indicators in order to have a broader picture of the wealth and the quality of life in a country. So yes, it's a very imperfect indicator, but it is one that everybody keeps using because it's difficult to do away completely with that indicator. I don't know if you want to ask any follow-up question to that.
No, I think that's very good, Quentin. And I see that Jesus has also been answering one of the questions that were asked by Mr. Sheridan, Joe Sheridan. So I think we are done, and you can continue. Yes.
Okay. Fair. So. As I mentioned, a key aspect of climate policy is the mainstream of climate action across all EU policies, across all EU instruments. I just mentioned, or we talked already about the RRF, the Just Transition Fund, the Horizon Europe and Innovation Fund, which is funded by the sale of EU ETS allowances. There's the Circular Economy Action Plan, the European Industrial Strategy. All these even if these elements of the Green Deal into the strategies themselves. The CAP is the Common Agricultural Policy is clearly another important element of that. There's still there's been quite a bit of debate on whether the proposal, the CAP reform, was ambitious enough. I'm not going to get into that because I'm not at all an agricultural expert. But yes, it's clearly there was an intent and a desire to also integrate climate considerations and make sure that the agricultural sector and the policies that support agriculture had in mind the need to transition to climate neutrality by 2050. Now, the international dimension of our climate policy, what has been very important is that with the adoption of the climate neutrality objective, with the proposal in 2018 and then the adoption at the end of 2019 by the EU Council, then this has been strong because it showed that a very major economy in the world, major developed economy, was willing to even think about achieving net climate neutrality by 2050, but still, and consider that it could do this by creating jobs and by improving the well-being of our citizens. This was, it's become almost commonplace now to see other major economies thinking about climate neutrality. We are no longer the only ones to indicate this as our objective for 2050, but it was a major milestone. I think the fact that the EU put this on the table in 2018, 2019 was really a groundbreaking policy proposal or strategic proposal, not yet a policy proposal yet, but a strategic proposal. And this has really it has shifted the debate, I think, internationally on what we need to achieve, which was clearly determined by science, but also what we can achieve within that kind of horizon. Now, as I mentioned already, the European Council endorsed the net 55% target for 2030 in December 2030. The adoption of that target was certainly not a done deal. I think nobody in the Commission expected this was going to be an easy task, but between the time the proposal was done by the Commission in September and December, this is very, very little time excuse me, to ensure that 27 member states actually agree on such a major increase in the ambition of climate policy. This is 15% percentage point increase in the target in the 10-year period, which is a major upgrade. And this has been done very quickly. So that it shows that there is a consensus across EU member states that yes, more needs to be done on climate and the environment. And now this has been submitted to the UNFCCC as our updated nationally determined contribution. So it's clearly important for all countries now, and especially the members of the G20, to come forward with more ambition. But I think the fact that we put on the table and we actually put it in DC, and other G20 countries, and we've seen now in the Paris Agreement 30 days after the inaugural of President Biden. So they are basically effectively a member of the Paris Agreement, which is a major change. We're seeing a major reversal back to something more sensible in the US after the inauguration of President Biden. And our purpose is to use the full spectrum of external policy instruments, including in support of least developed countries and middle income countries and neighboring countries to upgrade their policy ambition. And we are really fostering increasing cooperation and a higher ambition at the international. So the next steps is to adopt the climate law proposal, which would then integrate the net 55% target into it, so it will become EU law once the climate law is adopted. And we obviously invited the European Parliament and the Council to reach an agreement as quickly as possible on this ambition, which would then set 5% and the climate neutrality by 2050 into law, which would be a major, again, achievement. And have this into EU law would have implications for other policy instruments. And we are, as I mentioned now, at the moment, reviewing all the key climate and energy legislation, following broad public debate, consultations with the Parliament, with the Council, with the ECOSOC and Committee of the Regions, in order to be in position. And a lot of Commission services have been working around the clock, and certainly at the DG Klima, we've been working around the clock to put legislative proposals on the table by June 2021 as part of the Fit for 55 package. And on our side, it includes a revised EU ETS regulation, a revised effort sharing regulation, revised LULUCF regulation, revised CO2 in car regulation. Then we would have other initiatives on aviation and maritime emissions. Then there are the other proposals which are part of this, the changes in the Energy Efficiency Directive, Renewables Energy Directive, the EPBD, the Energy Performance in Buildings Directive, and the Energy Taxation Directive, and the Carbon Border Adjustment Measure, for which proposal will be put on the table by June 2021. So there will be a lot of proposals that will be put forward by the middle of this year. That will then go through the process of co-legislation. We hope to have an adoption of new policies, new legislation as quickly as possible, so that we can really translate the target into concrete policies and measures at the EU level. Thank you.
Thank you, Quentin. Thank you very much. If you allow me, there are a few more questions in the chat. I don't know if perhaps if you stop your presentation,
yes,
you can read them yourselves, because I mean, you know better the jargon than I do. But otherwise, I will be happy to read them out to you. Huh? You have to stop presenting.
Yes, my screen has been minimized, and I can't see. Can't get it to have a full screen for the Cisco WebEx. Okay, how can I? Why is it showing me?
Not sure whether.
Okay. Stop sharing. Yeah.
That's it.
Okay, good.
So, and you can perhaps you may switch on your camera as you are the speaker. So
yes, I start my video.
Great.
Okay, I have my video.
Wonderful.
And let me.
Okay, many thanks, Quentin. Many thanks for this very useful presentation, by the way. And the first question in the row is by Mrs. Carr. Climate integration with ERDF / cohesion funding. You see it? 12, 13.
Wait, I need to 12, 13. I don't see it. Oh yeah, no.
Mrs. Carr.
Oh yes.
Oh no, she has sent it to me. So she says climate integration
No.
with
Okay.
ERDF / cohesion funding ? Otherwise, I will give her the floor. She can. I think that would be best.
Yes,
I will give her the floor. I will give her the floor. Mrs. Carr, I will give you the floor.
Maybe you can take the floor.
Yes, it's just that we went. Hello.
I think go ahead there, Anya. I think.
Yes. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, Mrs. Carr, we hear you.
Okay. Well, I just know that we went through the consultation on the review of the new program last year for the ERDF, and I was just wondering, you mentioned a lot of different policy areas, and that was just one that you didn't mention, so I was just wondering, will there be policies that give preference to and priority to climate action within the cohesion funding?
Sorry, I only heard some small bits of what you said. Maybe I can just, yes, I mean, I'll just answer what I can on the basis of what I could hear. So yes, I mean, as I mentioned, there is an objective to have a mainstreaming of climate action in the EU budget as a whole. So clearly that includes the regional funding, the cohesion funding. Is to have a 25% mainstreaming of climate policies into the EU. Now, I do not remember exactly what the targets are. Different targets, funds and instruments for the recovery and resilience facility. The target is 37%. For the there, but yes, so there is clearly a need and a requirement to also have full integration and have a component of climate policy into the regional and cohesion funding. But I would need to get back to you to see what the precise requirements, and this is something that our colleagues in DG Regio will be able to answer as well. But this is something I picked up in my head as to what the percentages are in terms of climate action for each of these funds.
Thank you, Quentin. Yeah, I don't know if it's the same problem with all the other participants, but from time to time we lose the connection, so we don't hear what you are saying. So not sure. I hope this will improve. Then I don't know if you see. You should see it. The question by Brendan Mooney to everyone.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yes. So please let me know if you cannot hear me. Just flag it to me. I had trouble hearing the previous intervention as well. So maybe it's just it's not just me, but it's everyone. So this question on the support fight through the GTF and the state aid restrictions, and I think the state aid issue is something that will apply not just to the GTF, but certainly also to the recovery and resilience facility. Yes, state aid rules will apply where relevant, and there is a guidance that has been issued to member states as to how this will apply for different areas, different sectors, and for different funds. There's been detailed information now released on state aid rules or guidance, but the rules are what they are. It is the GBER, it is the de minimis, it is the environmental and energy aid guidelines. So the guidelines are what they are, but there's guidance, not guidelines, but guidance or interpretation of how the guidance will apply in the context of the resilience facility. and others that has been issued to member states. And yes, when getting to the point of the GBER, then yes, there are revisions to the GBER which are currently being prepared. I think there's been 2 rounds of consultation with member states now, and they should be adopted. So that the revisions on the GBER, which should hopefully make it easier to provide funding also to SMEs, the revisions to the GBER will be adopted relatively soon. I can't give you an exact timeline, but given that the consultation with member states and the consultation internally within the European Commission have been completed, I imagine that that DG Competition should be able to issue the revisions to the GBER relatively soon.
I hope this answers your question. I guess so. Otherwise, you can do not hesitate to raise your hand. But thank you, Quentin, for answering this question and other questions. Yes. So everything you see that the thanks in the chat, so it should be fine. Thanks again. I don't think there are other questions. I don't see any more hands raised apart from Mr. Gingel's hand, but I think this is from earlier on. So I think that we can then round up this session. Quentin?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful.
Fine for me.
Yes. Thank you once again for your availability. The connection was pretty good. Of course, this is something we do not control, unfortunately, but we try to make the best of it. Huh?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, as always.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And I see that the next speaker, Mr. Merciol, has already joined us. So instead of holding a break for a few minutes, I would gladly give the floor to Mr. Merciol.
Yes. Yep.
Very good.
Yes. Good morning. Thanks a lot, and good morning to all of you. Happy to join the I would say the meeting today, and I hope, of course, you are all, I would say, well in these specific situations. I will try. I need your help in order to share the presentation, please. Yes.
I'm doing it.
Yeah. No, I see. I can do it. I just have to check if I can do it. Yes. Okay. I check if it works, because
it works.
Okay. It seems to be yes.
It's uploading. It's uploading.
Okay, no, because I don't see what you see for the moment.
It's uploading. You only have to put it in slideshow, and
yes, that's what I try to do. Just a second with the mouse, so that the mouse is at the right place. Okay, and then I think this way you see it. No?
Perfect.
Okay.
And for your information, Mr. Merciol, I will keep an eye on the chat box, because it's for you, it's difficult to see the chat box while you are presenting. And if you allow me, I will interrupt you when I see a question coming up, or either you take it at the end of your presentation, as you wish.
Yeah. No. Okay, you can. Thanks. No, you can interrupt when you want. No problem on that.
Okay.
Because I think it's better. Again, the only thing, but I will then, of course, inform the person in case, of course, it's just a point I would be, I would say, going to cover in just the minutes to come. Of course, I will just mention it to the person, but don't worry for that.
Wonderful.
Okay. So thanks. So I think you can hear me correctly. So let's start. And again, sorry for all of you, because as you have no break, so you will have to wait a moment before you can go for lunchtime. But in fact, you will go earlier to lunchtime. So I think that that's great for you. So I'm happy to present you the LIFE program. In fact, LIFE, but just for the one who really want to know where the name comes from, it's in French. In fact, that the name has been first, I would say, found. It was in 1992, and it was also the financial instrument for environment. So that's where it comes from in French. And then, of course, we kept this name because LIFE is a great name. And LIFE basically is I would say, only program purely dedicated to environment and climate objectives. So we are very proud of this. And as I said, this program has been adopted in 1992. It was at the same time as the Birds and Habitat Directive. And LIFE from the beginning contribute, of course, greatly to this Natura 2000 network. So at the beginning, it really focused a lot on nature and biodiversity. And with, I would say, the years, so it helps step by step, I would say, the project to collect all the data in order to design, I would say, the different seats of Natura 2000, and it helped as well to establish a mechanism for the management. And LIFE has launched as well, I would say, various of pilot works, which has then been used as best practice in order to develop further this aspect. And of course, LIFE, we will come back to that, but just to start immediately from the beginning, LIFE, of course, has a relatively modest budget. So it's not a big budget. We will see that. It's a few billion euro. Of course, it's not totally small, but it's not so much. So LIFE is considered, in fact, as a niche between, I would say, the EU. Yes, sorry, I see that you want to annotate the content. It's okay. I accept.
No, it's okay. I just wanted to tell you that there is a gray frame on top of your slide. So I don't know what it is on the right hand side.
Okay. Sorry, I try. I think that comes from, is it this one?
This one, yes, indeed.
Yes, but it's like this.
Voilà, perfect.
It's okay. No, in fact, it was a part of your of your picture, of your video.
Okay, good.
So okay, but please tell me when you see something, because I cannot control it, of course, totally. So, as I was saying, LIFE is a small program, and it's just, I would say, between what can be supported, I would say, in research and innovation on the one hand, then we can have, I would say, activities financed by LIFE, and then we can go, I would say, to the large development of projects. So you see, we are just in between these two elements, and we try, of course, to bridge the gap between these. Try to change it. Sorry. I try to change. Sorry, I try now to change the slide, but I have a problem.
It is correct. And to proceed, you have to go to the left-hand side, and there you can go to your next slide by clicking on next slide.
Sorry, we will make it, but I don't. That's it now.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
Okay. No, thanks. So thanks, thanks a lot. So as I said again, some I would say general words on the LIFE program. So we have had, of course, various I would say programs one after the other, and since the beginning, of course, we have had now we reach, I would say, more or less 5,000 budget, 500 projects. So you can see we have, I would say, already a big, I would say, experience, and all these project, in fact, can be found, and but you will, of course, have also the possibility to find the reference to it, but can be found, I would say, in our database, which is available on internet. So this means that you have, I would say, this more or less 5,000 examples of what has been done or what is being done for the moment. And of course, just to say, because I started by saying, of course, we have nature and biodiversity, but of course we have as well, I would say, the other environmental and climate elements to be supported. And for instance, on top of Natura 2000 and Climate Habitat Directive, LIFE has participated to the support. Sorry, I see. Do you see? Oh no, okay, because I see sometimes some pop-ups. So LIFE has participated to the support of some of the more recent policy developments, such as, I would say, the Circular Economy Package, the 2030 Climate and Energy Framework, and the implementation of the Paris Agreement. So, of course, with our own small, I would say, budget, but we can participate to different, I would say, studies and I would say activities that we can show the result of it. And globally, in fact, LIFE is, I would say, really well appreciated by all the stakeholders, and it has been considered that it has a good added value, because when we had to, I would say, present a new program, we had, of course, to go through an assessment of the present program, and it has to be considered that, of course, LIFE really delivers for all these environment and climate policies. And just the last point, because you see it on the slide, in fact, from 2014, and then we will show that it will evolve again, but from 2014, we had, I would say, specifically 2 different sub-programs, just to clearly show, I would say, and make a difference between the support between environment and climate. This being said, of course, we have a lot of joint activities both together, because activities, I would say, in favor of environment, of course, are good for climate, and the opposite as well. Sorry. So, maybe just a few words before we continue on LIFE and Ireland. I would like to tell you a few words about, I would say, the project we have. So, in fact, as you see, even already from this project, you see that Ireland, but as I would say, many I would say places, unfortunately, are not in a, I would say, very good position regarding the conservation of habitats and birds. But here, with the LIFE project, we can provide some type of support for this. And just to take the example of this project, as you can see, it gives an example, of course, just an example, but you can see we have here a budget of 5 million for the total, I would say, implementation, and the support of 4 million, because as it's a project dealing with nature and biodiversity, then we can reach 75% of projects. And just to show you what is the type of activities we can have, for instance, with this project. In fact, the idea is to, I would say, be able to work, I would say, with the landowners and to secure their cooperation, to raise the water levels, and to remove, I would say, naturally generating trees there. So really very concrete, I would say, activities on the spot. And so I go to the next slide. Yes, and here you have the list of I would say projects, so that you can see the different projects which has been made for Ireland. And in fact, just to tell you, because you may ask yourself, okay, where you are with that compared to other member states. In fact, if we consider the number of proposals presented by Ireland, and if we consider, I'd say, the success rate, so meaning when you are successful based on the number of, if we compare, I'd say, the number of proposals accepted in the program and the number of proposals, I would say, presented, we see that Ireland is above the average regarding the situation. And of course, one of the concerns for some member states, and including Ireland, is that they still, say, want that we do as much as we can in order to really ensure I would say, a fair balance between the different member states, as you have, of course, even if Ireland is in a good situation, you, of course, have sometimes, I would say, a couple of member states who are much more successful than the others. But this, and we will come back to it as well, this is something which is important for us. We know it. We have for this what we call specific capacity building for the member state when needed. And it's foreseen in the regulation that on the one hand, LIFE, I would say, is based for the selection of the project on the, I would say, the quality, which is, of course, the primary element. But of course, at the same time, we know and we will try to have, I would say, activities in order to promote, I would say, the improvement of quality of project in all the member states. So this is the way we try to tackle and to see this, I would say, geographical balance, but it's not, I would say, through allocation of budget per member state. So I think this is an important element. This type of, I would say, rules, I would say, were tried in the past, but they were not really successful. So finally, we don't go for that, but we find other ways. Then, if we go now to the LIFE priority areas, here it's just, of course, we will go to the new LIFE project, but just for you to know where we are for the moment, because the new LIFE program is not yet adopted. And for the persons who are already familiar with it, so you see the way it's organized for the moment. So with a budget of 3.5 billion, you have, as I said, the two sub-programs for environment and climate. And within them, you have, I would say, three areas of, I would say, support. So nature and biodiversity, as you know, environment and resource efficiency. So we can, I would say, cover water, soil, and all these elements. And in the future, of course, we'll clearly mention circular economy and governance information, which is, of course, supported both in the environment and the climate sub-program. And for climate, of course, we have, I would say, mitigation and adaptation. And just to mention as well, because this will be a change with the new program, in the present program, we have to ensure that a minimum of 81% of the full budget, so you see here, full budget, is, I would say, devoted to grants. And the rest of it, of course, is used to, I would say, other activities like procurement, if studies are needed, or monitoring of the program, and reporting, of course. So LIFE, of course, will continue after 2020. Of course, as you know, the, I would say, EU program are, I would say, regularly assessed, and a new framework is, I would say, agreed by the Council and the Parliament for all the program at the same time. Here we are now for the new framework 2021-2027, and we will soon get an adoption of the program, but of course we are slightly less, slightly late compared to what we expected, just because there has been, I would say, discussion regarding the budget, which has taken, I would say, more time than we expected. But at the end, we got an agreement, so we can continue, I would say, the preparation of the program. So we have now a new multi-annual financial framework. Regarding, so the second point you see on your slide, the LIFE regulation. So in fact, we have started, of course, with the member state and the parliament, the preparation without, of course, having a budget agreed at the same time. But this has allowed us to come to a first agreement in 2019, where we have, I would say, agreed on the basic element, all the basic element of the new program, except, of course, a couple of points like the budget, or say some points related to third country accession. What is, and of course, we will have then, on the basis of the on the LIFE regulation, we will have then the multi-annual work program, because in fact, in order to translate, I would say, the multi-annual the LIFE program, we will need, of course, a multi-annual work program which goes in more details on this. One of the main elements of the new program will be the inclusion of the clean energy transition activities. So these are activities that exist for the moment, that are supported until now under the research program under Horizon 2020. And these are, in fact, capacity building activity. So these activities, they focus on the energy efficiency and small-scale renewable that contribute to climate mitigation. The activities, so they address the different elements of the market environment, and they develop, in fact, and spread best practice in policy implementation. They aim at mobilizing investment, improving skills, and creating favorable conditions for the development of the market. And they provide, I would say, support to socio-economic transformation, and they address, because one of the person asked for a question, we can come back to that later, they address as well vulnerabilities. And so on top of this, I would say, new program, what we can indicate especially is, of course, the revised, say, co-financing rate. Again, we don't have for the moment a new regulation adopted, but we have had a first agreement, and we have had the first, what we call the first reading of the Parliament. And as the only elements were, as I said, budget and a few other horizontal issues, in fact, we know already before, say, the final agreement, we know already what will be, say, the main element of the program. And so for the co-funding rates, in fact, we will be able to continue, in fact, to support. I just see some pop-ups. I try to suppress them. We will be, of course, continuing, I would say, the support of the main activities at a rate of 60%, and with 75% when we have activities specifically dedicated to nature and biodiversity. And we have a new type of activities, which is called other actions, for which we do not have, I would say, ask for the moment. We do not have, I would say, a fixed percentage of support, and then this will be, I would say, discussed with the member state and with, especially with the LIFE committee in developing the multi-annual work program. And in order to develop this multi-annual work program, what we have done, so based on the draft regulation, which has been adopted by the Commission and presented to Council and Parliament, we have organized already a specific workshop with stakeholders, and we have even organized, I would say, an inquiry about, I would say, the main points for everyone to be able to reply. Of course, it was not a formal, I would say, inquiry, because it's not necessary, but we wanted at least to give the possibilities for the stakeholders to provide some input if they want. And the main, I would say, question we had were regarding, say, the program design with the organization of different sub-programs and so on and so forth. I would say some small grants activities, because of course life sometimes is asked, say, not only to have, say, a big project, but to see how we can have some small supports, I would say, to a specific project on the field. And there were as well, say, discussion regarding the procedure, because we have in the program for the moment, I would say, two types of procedure, which is either the full proposal to be presented immediately, or I would say two-step approach, which means you first present a short, I would say, summary of your proposal, and then if you are preselected, you can go for the other proposal. This again, in order to avoid, I would say, that the beneficiaries, the applicant, they have to spend, I would say, too much budget if the proposal is not selected. So to come more in detail in the proposal, as I said, we have, I would say, the proposal from the Commission, and where we are exactly now. So I said we had the first, I would say, trilogue. So it meant, sorry, a first reading of the Parliament. So it meant that at the time already the Council and Parliament were in agreement on most of the elements, and then after we had an agreement on the MFA budget, then we could fine-tune, I would say, the agreement. And then we have had what we call a trilogue, where on 17th of December, I would say, the Parliament and the Council agreed. So now on the final text for the for the LIFE program, and with a budget which will be, I would say, very similar to the ones proposed by the Commission. And the budget, again, is just a deduction from the agreement on the new MFF, which has been reached between the Council and the Parliament. And now, because I think it's very important for you to understand, now when will the regulation be adopted? The regulation, in fact, now has still to go, I'll say, in internal procedure with the Council and the Parliament, with the objective that I would say we will have by normally, I would say, end of April, we would have the final, I would say, agreement, the final endorsement, and then we can have, I would say, the publication of the regulation. And just for you to understand, it takes still some time, because in fact we have as well to ensure, I would say, the translation and the agreement, of course, on the text in all the different language, EU language. So this is why I would say this is important, but it's very important as well for all, I would say, the stakeholders, so that everyone can clearly understand it's in all language what we want to develop. So the new program, as we said, we have in fact a new program which is in a way more an evolution of the existing program. So when we compare it, we say no, it's not a revolution; it's more an evolution where we have tried, I would say, to ensure on the one hand the continuity of the present program, and at the same time we have tried to revise and simplify the objectives, because they were rather complex, but we have tried to revise them, and then now the objective, of course, they will be to, say, develop, demonstrate, and promote innovative techniques, including so far clean energy transition, because this program has been adopted, to support implementation and monitoring of, I would say, the different EU legislation, because LIFE is especially, of course, devoted to ensure the implementation of regulation, and for that, of course, insisting on capacity building of, on the one hand, the public sector, on the other hand, the private actors, to facilitate, I would say, this development, and as well to act as a catalyst for large-scale development, because what we want to do, as I said, we want to try to test a different, I would say, method, different projects, with a view either to get, I would say, a bigger development of this project on the spot, or to get, I would say, replication of the project in the different, I would say, EU places. And with this, again, it's more, I would say, continuity of all the activities that we have. And if you see, so the budget, this is the budget that has been proposed by the Commission, but at the end, the budget that will be adopted will be, I would say, very close to this one. So you can see that the main, say, changes compared to the present situation is that for nature and biodiversity, we have, I would say, to simplify, 1 billion more of budget with the new program compared to the present one. So really a very big effort put on nature and biodiversity. The new sub-program, which was called in the past environment, is now renamed and named circular economy and quality of life. So we really clearly insist on this circularity, and you see the budget, which is already substantial. And then we have, of course, for climate, we have on the one hand climate mitigation and adaptation, which have been regrouped in one single sub-program, and we have this new clean energy sub-programs, which I would say is the one added and comes to life. And why? Because in fact, the activities there are not, I would say, really activities to, I would say, develop the very, I would say, new technologies, but more, I would say, to ensure we support the area of the ones who need to catch up. So that's why it fits better to life. And then I go to the one. Yes. Maybe a few words, because you have had presentation from the colleagues on the Green Deal, but again, just to make it rather short, LIFE, of course, has been adopted prior to the Green Deal because it was in June 2018. But of course, it is, say, perfectly in line with the Green Deal. It will deliver, as we happy to say, we will deliver, say, 100% to the Green Deal, even if the Green Deal has been, I would say, adopted in December 2019, because everything which is in the LIFE program perfectly fit, I would say, to it. And so it will fit. Sorry, I went to. Sorry, to be careful. So LIFE will contribute to the Green Deal aims, which are, of course, to transform, say, the EU in a fair and prosperous society with modern, efficient, and competitive economy, and of course, to preserve and conserve and enhance, I would say, the EU natural capital. And LIFE, in fact, will boost and support the. Sorry, I made again. Yes. Here, LIFE will aim and boost the implementation of the Green Deal. And if we come back, sorry, I tried to go. Yes. If we come back here, and you see, because in fact, on the one hand, we will contribute, I would say, to halting and reversing, I would say, loss of wildlife habitat and species across the sector. So, especially through the first program, we will support the transition to circular economy and the implementation of the zero pollution agenda. And you see, especially the second point and the third point on climate. We will, of course, protect and improve the quality of EU natural resources, including, say, air, soil, water, and some other sectors. And we will, I would say, support the implementation of the energy and climate policy framework, as you see from this sub-program as well. So really, LIFE will totally fit, I would say, with the Green Deal. And sorry, try to, yes, the next one. So, what is LIFE financing at present? This slide again is more for the person who are more familiar with the LIFE, so that you can find again the type of activities we support. But I would say move quickly to the next slide, and then you can make a comparison for you, because in fact we, as I said, it's an evolution of the system, but we have a few, I would say, type of activities which has been slightly, I would say, regrouped, and some, for instance, no more directly exist like financial instruments, because now these financial instruments, they will be, I would say, regrouped under InvestEU, but LIFE will contribute to preparation of this financial instrument, and the European Solidarity Corps will not be supported directly, because now we have a specific regulation on the European Solidarity, I would say, projects. So, in fact, what will LIFE will support in 2021-27? As I said, we have grants on the one hand and other activities, so mainly, let's say, procurement and blending. The member states, they have asked, it was already, I would say, agreed in the first reading of the parliament, they have asked to have now 85% of budget devoted to grants and only 15% to other activities. The idea for them is to ensure that we really have activities on the spot. And it has been accepted, nevertheless, that some of, I would say, procurement can be considered equivalent to grants when really they, I would say, help really to prepare the grants, or equivalent to grants, but it's the best way to implement projects. And if you see the new names of activities, we will have, so what we call now standard action project. In fact, it's what we called in the past traditional project. This, I would say, is in fact the bulk, I would say, of the project that LIFE has supported, and which has really make it, I would say, a very good brand. And these projects, so they aim to develop and demonstrate and promote innovative technical method. They will contribute as well to knowledge-based and the application of best practices. They can support development, implementation, and monitoring and enforcement of legislation. And as I said, but that's valid for other projects as well, but they will help to catalyze, I would say, large-scale deployment. Because again, this is very important for us in order to get, I would say, replication of results and having these, I would say, results integrated in other policies. Then we will have what we call now strategic integrated project. So the strategic integrated project, in fact, they are the projects which are called for the moment integrated project. And as I would say, you will have on the one hand strategic integrated project, the standard one, and strategic integrated project for nature. And this project, in fact, they are a project that has been, I would say, launched in 2014, and they aim, in fact, to support the implementation of the program, but at, I would say, a higher level than the standard project. So it's more at regional or multinational, multi-regional, or even transnational, I would say, level. And in addition, what is asked, and which is very important, of course, is that the applicants, they are asked to provide some complementary funding. So it means that not only we have the live support and the standard, I would say, co-financing that is provided by the applicants, but in addition, we have, I would say, additional activities which are not directly in live, but which are, I would say, mobilized by the applicants. And just to give an idea, in fact, we have until now, I would say, to simplify again, 500, I would say, million euro of this type of integrated project, and we have additional funding for an amount of 15 billion euro. So really, it's a huge success of LIFE, because on the one hand, we have our own budget we monitor, but we can, I would say, facilitate, I would say, the use of other budget, I would say, for this global environmental and climate objectives. Then we have what we call the technical assistance project. So either they can be project in order to prepare this integrated project, because as they are integrated projects, I would say they are big projects, usually around, I would say, 10 million support from the LIFE program directly. So it may be useful, I would say, to have a project to support the preparation of them, or they can as well be project in order to facilitate, I would say, the accessing, I would say, to financial instruments, because I said we do not have financial instrument directly, but we will continue to facilitate this access, or the upscaling or replication of results and projects. And a very important element for MUMSET as well, here we will have as well, I would say, what we call the capacity building support to the member state when they are, I would say, with low effective participation to the LIFE program. This participation, of course, to be, I would say, defined based on a couple of, I would say, rules that we will have to agree with the LIFE committee with the adoption of the multi-annual work program. Then we have what we call the operating grants. These operating grants, they exist for long, and in fact, it's operating grants for NGOs, and they support, in fact, this operating grant, I would say, operational and administrative cost of these NGOs, and they are, it's a rather, I would say, a limited amount, but it's a call which is launched every 2 years in order to, say, support the NGOs so that they can continue their activities and ensure that I would say the civil society is involved in the process of, on the one hand, the preparation of the new ideas, and on the other hand, the implementation of it. And we have to finish with but what we call other action, but in fact, they may seems to be, I would say, the last one, just for what is not included. But in fact, other action is a very important element, because it's here that we may have, I would say, mainly activities relating to clean energy transition. So there will be, say, coordination and support actions, as I said, to break, I would say, market barrier for, I would say, renewable energies and energy efficiency. They will deal with capacity building as well and dissemination of information, and as well with awareness raising. But not to insist too much on it, we have, of course, as I said, for this other 15%, we will have procurement, so the different outside studies that may be useful in order to prepare new legislation. We can have some prizes to be launched by the program, and some blending, which means that, of course, there may be the possibilities, but to be seen with the LIFE committee, there may be the possibility that we can, say, bring some, say, grants in addition, say, to the financial instrument, to the financial support, say, beneficiary can get. Then, if we go now, of course, to the geographical coverage, so who can benefit from it? In fact, now the LIFE program, in fact, is, I would say, almost 100% only for the member state. We can have a few activities outside if really they are justified and interesting for the program. So basically, the principle will remain next in the next program. I see a pop-up. I try to suppress it. Up, here. And in fact, what we will have, so we will have again the situation where all the member states are eligible. And regarding third countries, and this was one of the, I would say, main issues that had to be say discussed during the discussion with the Council and the Parliament. Of course, we can have third countries that may participate on the basis of their situation. And in fact, here the rules are, say, rather clear, because we say that we can have, say, activities if they fill a couple of, say, of rules. And here, of course, we are mentioned here that, of course, UK will become a third country, and we will have to see, of course, if UK is intended to, I would say, accede to the LIFE program, because I would say the way to accede to the LIFE program is, of course, either you are a member state or you are a third country, and you have, I would say, an agreement, a political agreement, and then a technical agreement in order to see if you want to participate, to which part of the program, and what are the rules. But again, the idea globally, if we have activities outside the EU, it's that they may, I would say, be activities which are really needed, useful for the program. It has to be needed as well, as we said, for the implementation of the activities of the member states. So, of course, member states may have an interest to have activities outside. For instance, when we speak about, I would say, bird migration, there may be an interest to have activities outside the member state, but it's for the benefit of member states. And we ask that we have a coordinating beneficiary, which is from the EU. So we want to be sure that the project has, I say, a leader, which is in the EU. And again, basically, the third countries are asked, I would say, to support their own costs, which means so either there is a global, I would say, agreement on the participation of the program as such with the third countries, and then the rules will be established. But having this in mind, or if we have, I would say, a beneficiary from a third countries being involved, then of course it has the cost of the participant. Because again, the idea that we have the program for the benefit of the EU, and if others want to join, they have of course to follow, I would say, similar rules. Now coming more so to the I would say implementation. So within the the EU, what we see, first of all, yes, I did not mention it, LIFE is what we call a program with a bottom-up approach. So with the Clean Energy Transition Sub-Program, we will have sometimes some call which will be slightly more prescriptive. But basically, the idea of the program is that we indicate, I would say, the main objectives that we want to reach during the different calls. We refer to the different EU policies, and then it's up to the applicant to present proposal, and then, of course, we will select them, as I said, on the basis of the quality. So applicants can be, of course, all the type of applicants we can have. As mentioned, you see here, it can be, I say, all type of companies, research institute. But again, I said that LIFE is not, I say, to support research as such. It can be NGOs. I said that we have even specific grants for them, and of course, public administration. And in fact, to simplify, it's all legal persons which are registered can participate. And we have, when we look at the type of beneficiary we have, in fact, we have a rather, I would say, fair balance between the different type of stakeholders. And today, I would say, we have a diversity of actors, and this diversity is represented, again, to summarize by the fact that we have more or less 1/3 of private enterprise, 1/3 of NGO or civil society organization, and 1/3 of public authorities. So we have really, I would say, I would say representation, a good representation of all the different actors that we can have. As said, you see, but we insist on it. Of course, we do not focus on research, and that's why. For clean energy transition now, they will join us because it's not so much research that they support, and we do not support, of course, a very big project because this is more for rural and regional funds. And another important element is that we implement the program we implement the program, in fact, with the support of monitoring team and with the support of executive agencies. Since 2014, we have the EASM executive agencies who is in charge of the program. So EASM is the executive agency for small and medium-sized enterprise, and we will in the future have a change because now we will have a transfer of the activities through what will be named CINEA, which will be the new name of INEA, which is present executive agencies, and the new name will be, I would say, the Agency for European Climate, Infrastructure and Environment. And why do we have this change? Because in fact, it has been decided to, I would say, reassess the say allocation of files to agencies in order to really organize on the one hand, I would say, synergies and to focus more on the specialized agencies, and CINEA will deal more, I would say, with climate elements. But what is important, especially for the present, I would say, beneficiary, is that in any case we will ensure, say, a full continuity, because say the colleagues who are working for the moment in EASM will be the one who will be, say, working in INEA, so in CINEA. So for the beneficiary, it will not be a big change, except that, of course, but everyone will be informed at that moment. When we have a change of agency, we will have a change, of course, of website information, but this will be done at the moment. It should be done, I would say, in spring, because normally it's in April that we have this change to be done. And we mentioned as well the say external monitoring team. In fact, it's I would say one of specificity of LIFE compared with other programs, and it gives us say a strong added value, and especially for the beneficiaries, because it means that there is a regular I would say contact. I wouldn't say check, but a regular contact with the between the monitors and the beneficiary in order to ensure that the project, I would say, is implemented smoothly. In the case the beneficiary has any difficulties whatsoever, so we are informed in advance, and we avoid a situation where we would come at the end of the project where we would discover, I would say, major difficulty for which it's too late, I would say, to find a solution. Here, with this process, normally, we are all aware far in advance, and if there is anything to be, I would say, reassessed or modified, then we can do it when needed, so immediately. And with that, it helps as well for Life to have a very low error rate. So we are really, say, proud of this process. Because then we are sure we really provide to the beneficiary a strong support, because the beneficiaries, they don't see the monitors as, I would say, a constraint, but more a support, of course, during their work. As already mentioned, so the different type of support are presented here again. What is important is that until now we have what we call the project topics in the multi-annual program. So it means more details on the type of project to be supported. They will no more be in the multi-annual program as such, but they will be prepared by the Commission, and we are forcing to discuss it with the Life Committee as well, because we want to have the input of the member state on this. But in fact, the idea is that on the one hand, we will have, say, more flexibility if we need to adapt these different topics in case there are new priorities who are suddenly coming. We associate in any case the member states, or the Life Committee, for its I say development. And at the same time, of course, even if I say it will be more flexible, the idea is not to modify them regularly, but it's more to have really topics which are, I would say, valid for the duration of the multi-annual program, with only, I would say, small adjustment if there is a need. Then I come here. So now regarding the funding rate, as I said, and it was already mentioned in the first, I would say, reading of the Parliament, so it was something I agreed already for some months. The basic rule is that we have, I say, 60% of support in general. So Life means that if you bring a project, you need to find, I say, some co-financing from the applicant, and the co-financing can go up to 75% in some activities where the activities are, I would say, organized around nature and biodiversity. And I said for other actions, there is no, I say, percentage fixed, but here we will discuss with the different member states. And as I mentioned already, so you have the executive agency EAS until, I would say, spring 2021, and then I would say CINEA will take over. But again, I said, fully ensuring, I would say, the continuity, because to make simple, I would say the staff will be transferred, I would say, from one agency to the other, and of course the relation so will continue in the same way we had it until now. Then maybe to come in slight more, I say, detail on the type of project we have. So as I said, now what we call the traditional standard action project. So because in fact it was before the traditional project, but now called standard actions. So for everyone, and with a support of 60%, with the exception when we have, I would say, nature and biodiversity. And what we have as well is, of course, this project, they have to fit with the life objective. And we have, as I said, here we will have now two-stage approach. as I said, we have the two differences between one stage and two-stage approach. In the present Renewable program, we have tested the two-stage approach for the standard projects for environment. Now we will use it slightly more, and of course we use it as well for the new integrated project because this fits more, because as they are very big projects, it's really better that we just ask, I would say, some 10 pages of explanation to the applicant first in order to check if the idea is well presented, and then only I would say we ask for the full proposal. So it makes it, again, I said, more efficient for the beneficiary, so that they don't, I would say, spend too much I would say money on this if not needed. And regarding I would say the budget and the beneficiaries, in fact, life has no I would say specific rules regarding I would say the number of beneficiaries, and not even for the budget as such. So it's more here to give an idea of what we get. But you have seen at the beginning, the first project I presented was a standard project, and it was for 5 I would say million euros. So we can really have very different size of project. Here, life is not prescriptive at all on this. And there is no, in case some of you are familiar with other programs, there is no, for instance, the obligation to have at least 3 beneficiaries from different member states or whatsoever. We can have one single applicant, I would say, presented a project. So what means, I would say, more concretely, is all these different type of project, even for standard action projects. So we can have best practice. So again, we apply and we use, I would say, practices which exist already, and we have, I would say, to see projects which are either they will, say, test them in another type of circumstances, in other, I would say, member state. And of course, the evaluation of the best, the best practice as such is not part of the live project, because we are here, in fact, to test this, but not to develop, I would say, this project as such. So this is why it's important to mention it again. It's not research. We are just here, I would say, when we have something which is already mature, then we just want how it can be, I would say, applied in the different possibilities for the live program, and then replicate it. Yes, here we have, of course, as I said, especially for nature and biodiversity, we have, of course, the beneficiaries who are, I would say, invited to present a project, especially, say, to support, I would say, the habitat and birds directives. And with the new regulation, in addition, we refer to the possibilities of, say, to consider as well the UN red list, which means that we try to see how we can really ensure that we take into account the real, say, situation of all these species. So with that, we will really hope that we can cover, again, because life wants to be rather flexible, so we can cover most of the situation. Then if we have as well, said, we have best practice, we have demonstration project as well. So again, to test, I would say, innovative technique, not to, I would say, develop them as such. And here, of course, again, the monitoring and the evaluation is very important. And in the live proposal, what we ask as well the applicants is not only to present their project, to explain what they will achieve, but to present what we call the afterlife, which means what will happen at the end of the live project in order to see what can be done. And what we have as well is that we regularly try to have, say, some specific monitoring evaluation of projects which has been closed already for some years, in order to see what can be, I say, the achievement after some years. Of course, contractually, I say the relations are finished because the project is over, but we try to see and to demonstrate what can be achieved, I say, in the more longer term. And then we have as well, so all this type of pilot project and governance on information, for which, in fact, it was clearly mentioned in the first slide I presented, because they appeared as a specific, I would say, sub-element of the program, but now they don't appear no more. But in fact, they will continue, of course, to be covered by the program, because of course it's a very important element regarding governance and the member state. As I said, we as well want say to facilitate the access, of course, of the project to the market, and for that we have developed an activity what we call close to market project, and in fact these activities will be, I would say, continued in different way in the new program. But the idea, in fact, is to try to help to identify the projects that for which it may be interested, I would say, to have access to the market, and to help them, I would say, to develop better their project in order to get this support at the end, because in fact we may be in a situation where sometimes we have very good project, but of course the beneficiary, they have not say developed them in a way that can be attractive for investors. So we need to ensure that we provide all the information needed for investors, that we attract investors, that we show them the type of project we may have, so that at the end this type of project, it can reach the market, because of course what we want, as I said at the end, is that we have really a development and I would say application of all the activities all over I would say the EU. So if we can have, of course, market access to some projects, that's even I would say better. And because I mentioned market, so yes, because I mentioned access to market, just a word on startup as well. So we are supporting as well the involvement of startup in the LIFE program, and just to mention it, especially during the specific circumstances of the COVID pandemic, we have adapted slightly our calls in order to support, I would say, the applicant and the beneficiaries. And one of the elements we have added in the call for last year was a special section that we had on startup companies. And we, in fact, invite, say, the applicants, the big, say, companies where they're applicant to LIFE, to consider, say, LIFE as a potential incubator for startups. So we want really to try to see how we can, say, facilitate their involvement in a circumstances which is not easy for them, but with that we would facilitate, I would say, the access to the market for startups. So yes, as you see, we try really to develop all the possibilities for our project to reach, I would say, the market. And now just because we slightly advance, again, the new integrated project, as I mentioned. So for the strategic integrated project, in fact, they will really take over the activity that we have had until now. As I said, it was a great success, and, because we have, I would say, now some 50 project launch since 2014, and it means that with that we ensure, as I said, and which is very important, we have additional, I would say, funds, so that we really have an impact which is far beyond, I would say, the budget brought by LIFE. And again, this is for really big scale projects. and the co-financing rate, which has been discussed with the Council and the Parliament, will be say 60% as it is for the moment. Then we will have strategic nature project. So it's a new name of nature integrated project. And on the one hand, so they will continue, of course, to focus on the what we call the PAF, so the prioritized action frameworks. And at the same time, they can say refer to other plans or strategy as well, because this has been discussed in the negotiation. So in order to be rather, I would say, flexible, and they can so rely on the other plans and strategy which implement, for instance, nature and biodiversity, I would say, policies. And sorry. So the snaps, so they will continue, I say, the experience of the project we have for the moment. But in addition, I would say we will, I would say, focus more on the mainstreaming activity as well. So in order to really be sure that we, I would say, get, I would say, impact on the other, I would say, EU policies. Here now, just to show you, yes, because I mentioned the integrated project. So to show you one example that that we have for Ireland. So in fact, Ireland has been successful in having, I would say, an integrated project under life, this project, and as well, say, an integrated project for nature, and as well an integrated project for water as well. So you have this project. We have, as I said, another project, which is, of course, to support, I would say, the implementation of measures to protect and enhance the high status water. And so this project so has been I would say, allocated after the call of 2018. So you see, we have regular, I would say, project for Ireland. And of course, as I said, all these projects, you can find them on the website. Then we have so technical assistance. So technical assistance will be again slightly revised, but it's similar to what we have for the moment. On the one hand, as I said, is in order to prepare this strategic project, because of course strategic projects are big projects, so we need some support, accessing, say, to the financing instrument, as we said, measures in order to support, as I said, replication, upscaling of results, and also access to the market, and for the member state especially. So this capacity building for member state to needs, say, continue to need some support for that. And of course, this being said, on the one hand, we will have capacity building. On the other hand, we have what we call the network of the national contact point for life, so representative of the member state, I would say, in the member state for the life implementation. And through this network, of course, we will continue as well, I would say, to continue and disseminate activities. So there will be, on the one hand, capacity building specific to member state who needs it, but on the other hand, we will continue, of course, all the activities in order, again, as I said, to provide support to the network, which then can provide support to the different applicants so that they can be aware of the program through different information sessions, and that they can, I would say, get some support maybe as well, depending on the different member states are organized. They can get, I would say, advice and support for the preparation of their proposal, because then they can better, I would say, participate to the program. Because our view, again, as I said, is on the one hand to ensure I would say, the quality is the main element, but on the other hand as well to ensure that all the member states really participate effectively, I would say, to the program. And then so then here with the other action, as I explained, the other action is again for all the type of applicants we have. So there is no specific rules. Again, it's the case for all the type of activities, except of course for especially I would say the support to NGOs. But for the rest of it, the other action, they can be presented by all the type of applicant. And this other action, they are used especially, say, for the activities on clean energy transition. As I already mentioned, and the co-financing rate, of course, has not been, I would say, decided up to now. It will be presented for well, to the live committee, and we will, of course, discuss it at that moment. And then preparatory projects. In fact, we have, I would say, a preparatory project for Ireland, and we're happy for that. In fact, what we have done is we have said to the member state that as we will have the new program, we would be very happy if we can support the member state in order to prepare from the beginning project, and especially integrated project for nature. So this strategic nature project. And for this, we have launched a specific, I would say, call. And Ireland has replied, and we're happy with that, because then it can help to prepare very quickly already with the new program some proposal. And the objective, of course, is to come as soon as possible, I would say, with, as we said, concept note, because for this integrated project, as you know, so we have two-stage approach. So there will be first a concept note and then a full proposal to come later. So here it's again the type of support that can be provided, and this is not linked, of course, to I would say the situation of any member state. We try, of course, when we can, to provide, I would say, support for member state, especially for this nature project, because we would like, I would say, to have this type of project, this type of big nature project in all the member states as soon as we can. So that's why we have organized this specific support. And we have some member states who have replied to it. Not all of them, but some member states have replied to it, and we're happy that you have done it. Here, just to mention, because I mentioned the financial instrument, as I said, in the future, they will be under InvestEU, but in fact there is a project for I would say financial instrument which is related to Ireland, and which I would say is project regarding, I would say, plantation, and which combine, I would say, commercial aspects. So you see, you have had I would say a project in the different, I would say, strands of the program. And again, to start to sum up all the elements, in fact, the important document, as I said, is the life regulation. So we hope that we will get it by April. The multi-annual work program, so we hope that we can get it, I would say, by June. As I said, we work in parallel to the adoption of the regulation. So the idea is, as soon as we have the regulation, then we can, I would say, work on the adoption of the multi-annual program. Because basically, what is important, of course, for the applicant is not so much, I would say, all these elements, but the fact that at the end we will publish the different calls, and we will try to, I would say, stick to the calendar we have regularly when we try to publish the call. Normally, we publish them more in April, but here it should be maybe more around, of course, June, when we have the multi-annual program adopted. So this is the basic, I would say, element. Again, we cannot confirm this date for the moment as such, because we still need, I would say, approval of the, especially the member state on the content of the multi-annual program. But we are confident we will make it. And now, just to say a few additional, I would say, elements. What is important as well for the LIFE program, of course, it will be, I would say, to report on the results. And for this, we have developed a very detailed, I would say, key project indicators database for some years. This allows us to be able, and through, of course, the beneficiary, to be able to report on all the different projects. Because, in fact, what is I would say delicate point for us is that, as you have understood from the different elements I presented, we can cover many, I would say, different areas. And so, on the one hand, we have a program which delivers in all the areas. On the other hand, we have to try to find some indicators so that we can show really that as a whole the program can deliver as well. So we have in the new regulation, I would say, specific indicators which has been developed. So on nature and biodiversity, of course, circular economy, they will include soil, water, waste, chemical, and so on. We will have as well indicators on the migration, mitigation, and adaptation for climate, and clean energy transition. But with this, in fact, with this database, we can report on the result. And of course, this database rely as well, this information, in fact, rely as well on the applicant and then the beneficiary, who are the one who know, say, better the project. But at the same time, we try to simplify the process in order to ask the beneficiary, I say, to fill the indicators they consider the more relevant for them. Because we know that, of course, they may not be totally familiar with all this element. And also, it's a very important element for us. We want to ensure that, of course, the beneficiaries, they spend most of their time implementing, the concrete project. And now, just to come, I would say, really to the end of it. So you can, of course, when you present a proposal, as I said, you can have 2 stages or 1 full proposal. So this is clearly mentioned, I would say, at the level of the different codes, but already in the Methane program, we indicate the type of rules that will be used. And in fact, as again, this is some type of elements we provide regularly to the potential applicants. In fact, if you want to come with a good proposal, in fact, you will need, I would say, time to prepare it. So it cannot be prepared immediately. So it may take some time. And this is why we have, as I said, I would say, a Methane work program, which is stable for a couple of years, so that, of course, the applicants, they know what they can expect. They can prepare, I would say, it, and they can come to it. And so it's important that, of course, if the applicants, they want to come with a proposal, they clearly know what they want. They clearly have studied the results they want, and then they come with a nice proposal, including due to the fact that even if we have 2-stage approach for some type of project, this will not, say, provide the applicant, I would say, the time in order to totally develop a new concept if the idea is good. No, when they come, they need to know clearly what they want to do. So what we say, and I think it's important, I've said, to insist on this again. So it's very important that the applicants, they really clearly check exactly what is asked for, what are the exceptions, what are the different elements to ask in the document to be filled. And in fact, again, and this is important as well, especially for the support and the control of the action, and not to include, I would say, things which are not relevant to life. So just to focus on it, so that including when we look at the budget, we can really look at the budget, which is the budget, say, which fits to it. And yes, and reporting, of course, remember, say remember the extra point they can get. And here I would just, because I remember that we had a question from our colleagues regarding vulnerabilities, and we said that maybe with life we can reply as well to this. In fact, with the new regulation, we indicate that a specific attention will be given to areas with vulnerabilities. So in fact, as I said again, life is bottom-up approach. So it's for all, I would say, the applicants together, but we can have, say, in some specific conditions, so we say specific attention, which means the equivalent of some type of bonus, we can have specific attention, I would say, given to this vulnerable area. So through this, in fact, we reply to it. Of course, it's a specific attention, so which means that still the proposal must be, I would say, a good proposal. But if it's a good proposal and it fits with that, then we may have, I would say, calls where we refer to that. So it's not a full obligation for the program, but we will discuss again with the member state. But this will be, I would say, taken into account. Then I think, yes, and then maybe as well, because we come to the end before coming to the sources, and based on what I heard before in the discussion, we have as well an important element that can be interesting for the for you, which is to know that we have now what we call the seal of excellence, I would say, possibilities included in LIFE. It means that if we have projects which have been presented to LIFE, and if this project have been, I would say, pre-selected because they passed, I would say, the different assessment, but if this project they cannot be financed because, in fact, we do not have, I would say, budget enough because, of course, we have, well, fortunately for us, but unfortunately for the applicants, we have, I would say, much more, I would say, good proposals than the budget we have. So these budgets, which are very good projects, can be put on reserve list because they cannot be selected. But then this project could be, I would say, supported by, for instance, the European Regional Development Fund, European Social Fund, European Agriculture Fund for Rural Development. And what is more important is that the idea of this seal of excellence is that this project can be supported, but they have been selected by LIFE, so there is not a reassessment which is needed. And they can be supported, I would say, with I would say the original rules of the program which have selected them, so the LIFE program. So in fact, this could be something interesting. Of course, we will see how we can, I would say, make I would say these programs aware of this list of projects, and we can help the project to try to get additional support. So I think this is an important element as well, just to show that on the one hand we have our own budget, but if we can, we try, I would say, to support as well, I would say, even the project which cannot be funded because we don't have budget enough. Then here I just finished, but to mention here, of course, all the type of sources you have, but as I said, you have the website, you have the different regulation, and of course, as I mentioned as well, the live contact point. So I don't come in detail, and you will have, I've said, the slide. So thanks a lot for your attention, and I hope we are more or less on time. And of course, if you have any question, I would be happy to take them.
Thank you, Mr. Martial, for this very interesting presentation. I see that some have already left us, but have sent us or have sent you their thanks.
Yeah. No, but it's normal, no problem.
I don't know if Mr. David Grant or Mr. Barry Gukian would like to say a few words as a roundup. I would gladly give you the floor. And I haven't seen any further questions, to be honest. So okay. I think it was all crystal clear.
Yes, thanks, no problem. But in any case, if there would be a question later, as I said, we have the reference of the different ways to ask for more questions. And again, of course, we will see when we have the final text.
Okay, wonderful. In any case, the sessions have been recorded. I will send the recording to Mr. Grant and Mr. Gukian. So I don't know if you have something to say, Mr. Gukian, to round up, or Mr. Grant. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that was very, very useful. There was an awful lot of information covered there, and it will be really useful to get the video of that back, and it's something that we'll put on our website. And we might also put a feedback section so that people, when they do get to see that back, or people who haven't got a chance to see it, get to see it for the first time, can also send us on feedback. And with Jean-Claude's permission, we might send them on to him and keep the dialogue open. It would be fantastic.
Great. We will do so. I will send you the recording as soon as possible. And I hope you have enjoyed, but I'm sure you have enjoyed the presentations. So I wish you all a very good day, and hope to be in touch soon.
And we look forward to seeing everybody else back on Wednesday morning, hopefully at 9 again, for workshop number 2.
Okay. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks a lot.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jane.
Okay.
Bye-bye. Thanks.